I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for June 7th, 2017. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card, which are available in the lobby, and file it with Sherry prior to the start of the meeting. Speakers should state their name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience, and while the Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Could we have roll call, please?
Chair Merck.
Here.
Vice Chair Colisi.
Here.
Commissioners Jagiello.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Nolan.
Here.
Powers.
Here.
Isabella absent.
Thank you. Commissioner Nolan, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance,
Yes, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public communications is the time set aside during the Planning Commission for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? All right, we'll move on. Next is our consent items. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be considered routine by the governing bodies and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. There will be no discussion of these items unless before the governing body votes on the motion to adopt. Specific items are removed from the consent calendar for separate motions. First item is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for May 3rd, 2017.
I'll make a motion that we pass the minutes for May 3rd, 2017.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call, please?
Jagiello.
Here.
Corbin.
Yes. Sorry.
Corbin.
Yes.
Colisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Nolan.
Abstain.
Powers.
Yes.
Next is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for May 17th, 2017.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
Jagiello.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Colisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Powers.
Abstain.
Okay. Next item is disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. I'm going to start on my left with Commissioner Powers, and we'll just go around the room.
I visited the site. I had no ex parte contacts.
I also visited the site and had no ex parte contacts.
Commissioner Quillisi?
I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts.
I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts.
I visited the site, had no ex parte contact.
I'm very familiar with the site, and I did have a discussion with one of the neighbors regarding the bowling alley property, but it was very brief. Next is public hearing items, which there are none. I don't even know that way that's on the agenda. Discussion items. Number 3 is our Complete Streets Master Plan. Mr. Winiger, could you lead us through this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the commission. Jay Higgins, one of our consulting planners, will be introducing this item this evening, and Greg Grant, who's City Public Works Director, will be making a presentation. Jay?
Mr. Chair, Jay Higgins with the city to give you a very brief report or introduction rather to the Complete Streets Master Plan as it is now known. It's been a work in progress with the committee for many months. And our scope of work within the Community Development Department was to take the plan and filter it through the various other planning documents that exist now, the general plan, the zoning ordinance primarily, and a host of other planning documents that exist, and look for any conflicts or places where the new master plan would be tripped up by any number of policies within the city. In short, we didn't find any. Looked pretty hard. It looks to be that the subcommittee did a very good job at focusing all of their work and interest on, based on the current policy from 2012. So it's really an enhancement of that policy, implementing that policy with some more detail. Notably, it does not include specific projects. Those come back to you or the city on a project-by-project basis, so we haven't done any environmental review. There's lots of ideas, of course. There's some maps that show some linkages that are important, but those are not before you today in terms of a specific project. Really, it's a policy document. Our professional, at least my professional opinion, was that the Planning Commission should consider whether or not to take this planning document and wrap it up, all of the other extraneous associated, I should say, planning documents that are in your staff report and collapse everything into one big hunky-dory plan. So it's easier to read and find and implement, and it's easier for the public to understand without having to go through documents and plans that have been sitting on the shelf for a while. So that was something we considered. It's obviously a longer-term process to do that, but that's something that we thought you would at least want to discuss or comment on. And that is my presentation, really. Unless you have any questions for me right now, I'd like to turn it over to Greg, and he can walk you through the details. Thank
Do
you.
you have any questions for Mr. Higgins?
You know where to find me.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Grant with the Public Works Department, and I just want to give a little background on this project. About a few years ago, we recognized there were some existing outstanding grants that the city had not utilized, and it was a TDA Article 3, which promotes bike and pedestrian improvements. There was an outstanding grant for a bike and pedestrian master plan, which the city had already had, one from 99. In 2008, they did a draft improvement. I don't know if that came before this commission or not. And it was agreed that we could utilize that money to do a complete streets master plan. It was only about $20,000, it was about $18,000 the city had in that grant money. And that was kind of at the point we're just coming back into the funding, sort of pre-recessionary levels. And so we're trying to keep that tight and utilize that money. So we actually contacted Nelson Nygaard, which has a great reputation in these kind of projects, these complete streets and new urbanism type projects. And they were hired as a subcontractor to Sargentown Planning for the neighborhood planning project. So it looked like a great opportunity to utilize them for that small amount of money to help further the complete streets policy the city had adopted, and that's recapped in this administrative report. So that 2000, I forget the year of the complete streets policy, but when that was adopted, it had a goal in it to further the plan by creating an implementation plan. And so the goal of this was to take that policy and take a look at all the existing projects that were outstanding around the city that have been talked about for some time with the Complete Streets Subcommittee and by the council, and try to further those. But with that limited amount of money, it was understood that the consultant would go out and spend about 3 days with the public. So it's in the report, and I guess it's a good time to kick into the report. So I think what I'd like to do is just move quickly through the master plan report itself, which is the attachment to the administrative report, and just highlight a few areas to give you a feel for it, depending on how well you're able to look at it. So, so here's the table of contents, and you can see that, hopefully you can see that from your seats, and that it gives a little background for the project, what went on, that the review of what the complete streets policy is for the city, and the general plan, and that it's a living document that can be updated and amended, and that describes what complete streets are and what the existing conditions are in our city and so on. And it talks about active transportation, which is kind of a secondary term for complete streets. You'll hear terms like new urbanism, active transportation. The idea is the city has secured a nearly $3 million grant for an active transportation program grant, and that was a combination of state and federal funding, and it's promoting bike and pedestrian uses. And that project is described in this report as well, but it's all of Ojai Avenue through the Y, up Maricopa, all the way to El Roblar. And it adds bike facilities of varying degree, bike lanes on Ojai Avenue, where there's more room up on Maricopa Highway. It actually has a couple options shown in this report as well, but as part of the ATP for adding class 4 or separated bike lanes to improve the pedestrian crosswalks and also to do sidewalk infill and tree infill. So that term you'll hear come up as well, but they're all kind of synonymous, the terms. And then it talks a little bit about there's trade-offs. Obviously, whenever you add a bike lane, you're squeezing the travel lanes or removing parking lanes. There's always trade-offs that they talked about. Then there's some general, most of the Complete Streets Master Plan spends time on bike recommendations, pedestrian recommendations, traffic calming recommendations, and then a minor note about the implementation. So this is kind of what the consultant did. They went out and discovered through this 3-day outreach effort. They first came up to Ojai and researched what was available up here. And then they spent 3 full days, 1 day on pedestrian outreach, 1 day on bicycle improvement outreach, and 1 day on traffic calming outreach. And that was over at the Women's Center. People remember it's actually been nearly a couple of years ago. So they did all that outreach and prepared the report, the design, that's number 3. They actually presented a lot of this stuff at the end of that 3-day outreach effort that night, and then they documented it in this report. So here is the overview of what the plan came up with. The existing bike facilities in the city. The yellow line is the Ojai Valley Bike Trail. That's the old railroad alignment, right? Everybody should recognize. You go up into town, I guess there's a little, at the Y, and it goes parallel to Ojai Avenue, but it drifts slightly to the south over to the Bryant Street industrial area. It ends, I think, as most people might know, it goes alongside the Humane Society, and it ends somewhat abruptly over there by Soul Park. And then this is the emphasis of the plan, is that to try to get some east-west routes for bicycles. So that's what you see in the red lines. And then the pedestrian emphasis is mostly to improve Ojai Avenue, Maricopa Highway, but certainly the side streets have plenty of emphasis as well. This is, when you get into the bike recommendations section, there's this survey which is oftentimes referred to. It was done up in Portland, but they find that this survey is pretty consistent across America. And it really goes out and asks residents what is their level of comfort and interest in biking, period. So here's the results of the survey. 33% of the people say, no way, I don't care how safe you make it, I'm not going to bike. They're just not interested. 60% are very interested but concerned, and that is the safety issue, right? If you're going out with a family or otherwise, how dangerous is it to ride a bicycle? That's a consideration. And it's interesting, I just talked about the ATP project with the Nordhoff High School Parents Association board the other day, and the principal was mentioning that it used to be when he started there, the bike racks had a lot of bikes. And he said nowadays it's around 15 to 20 is typical. And I know when I was a kid in school, we're all getting older, but there was a lot of bikes at school, so I'm not sure what it's like in my town either, but people just aren't riding to school. They don't feel as safe. That area is just packed every morning, as everybody knows, in front of the high school and in the pickup at night as well. So I think everybody's interested. A lot of the high school students and parents would just soon their kids ride a bike in general, but they're concerned about the safety of it. So that's that big 60% section. And then you've got a lot of people that are more of the hardcore group. The enthused and confident is 7%, and then less than 1% of the fearless people you see riding down 33 through Oakview, and you have a hard time getting them off the highway, So there's those varying levels of commitment. Here's the proposed bike network. So you can see the red line being the existing low stress. So this is a term which is fairly synonymous with the class 1 bike lanes. When you have a fully separated bike lane, a bike trail. So the old railroad alignment is what's shown on the map. But the goal, and you can see when it gets up into Libby Park, that's actually still a Class 1, right, that goes north up to Ojai Avenue, that red line. And, but there's a goal to have, you can see we don't really have that many other existing facilities. On Grand Avenue, we do have an existing Sharrow, which is kind of a limited safety feature. You're sharing the road with cars, so it has limited safety stress related to it. And so the goal is to develop it into this kind of a plan where you've got a lot of alternatives from any neighborhood to get to downtown or over to the schools, safe routes to schools, and get around town on bikes, and as well as pedestrian improvements. So here are some options that you'll see. So again, I'm just taking clips, some highlights from the plan and pulling them out. But Grand Avenue has a lot of options. So several options were considered that work in the existing curb-to-curb width, which has its problems. There's 40-foot curb-to-curb, which was originally designed as a city standard to have 8-foot parking lanes on each side and a 12-foot travel lane for cars, so it's 40-foot total. But that doesn't work too good for squeezing bike lanes in. So this is some ways to deal with it. You know, there's ways to really tighten up the travel lanes and make it work. You can eliminate parking on one side that creates extra room, but obviously there's concern from residents. We've already heard about that kind of approach. So that highlights a few options in staying inside the curb-to-curb. But Grand Avenue is known to have a 66-foot right-of-way, so there's actually 13 foot outside of the curb on both the north and south side. So this has various options that could be utilized. So back to the whole plan is that it doesn't peg the exact answer, it gives options. And all of these options will be considered further when these plans go out for full construction, for outreach to the public, for approval to Planning Commission in most cases, and onward to the City Council for approval. So a lot of options on Grand Avenue. That's a major focus. There was, if you look at this route here, to get east-west, I don't know if this pointer works very good. It doesn't work very good at all, actually, on the screen. But okay, so, but the east-west route, you can stay on Ojai Avenue or use the Ojai Valley Bike Trail. But there's nothing up on the north side. So a lot of people go the same way a lot of cars go through. You take Aliso to Kuyama all the way over. So if you do that here, it was, as you go through Kuyama, it's a fairly narrower street, and there was a thought, is there a way to decrease the cut-through car traffic and promote bikes? So this is an option that would work, is you could take these kind of triangles that already exist in the Arboleda, and you could take that upper section and say bikes only, and you could force the cars to use the other portion of the triangle. You'd probably smooth out the sharp curve a little bit, not quite as shown, but there's a concept. And then the cars could take that. It just becomes kind of a traffic calming measure and would tend to deter some of the traffic and make it safer for the bikes to go through. So you see this commonly in a lot of really pro-bike communities. Sacramento, Seattle, San Francisco, you'll see a street where it's blocked for one way to help bikes get through. Now, here's a graphic, very rough one, obviously, but that is an existing picture of the triangle and the intersection. So you can see the bikes would come through this way. There'd be some kind of a barrier to not let cars go through with some additional signage. So the cars would be forced to the right and have to come back around to the left. Again, a concept. We're not ready to go build this after this plan is adopted. So then here's some figures if you hop out onto the Ojai Avenue. For instance, right now the top shows the existing. There's 18-foot travel lane on each side with a 12-foot painted median in the center. So there's enough room on practically all of Ojai Avenue to take that median, leave it, put 2 tighter travel lanes, put a 5-foot bike lane. Through most of it, you can fit a 5-foot bike lane on both sides with parking, and it varies based on how much room is available. But that shows the concept of what could be done and is being proposed actually in the ATP grant. Here's another section of Ojai Avenue from Ventura to the east end of the arcade. So when you're all the way down right in front of the arcade, the curb-to-curb width is narrower, so It really has to be a share, and it maintains parking on both sides, recognizing that the businesses want to keep that parking. And then here's out of Maricopa Highway. There, as everybody's aware, you got the median and a lot of width. So on each side, there's the 12 plus 19 for the 2 travel lanes in each direction. And so curb to median, I should say, in the center is 31 feet. I thought it was 32 feet. And you can do things like the lower option, you could maintain 2 travel lanes in each direction and still fit a buffered bike lane in there. Or, as shown on this slide, there's a 2-lane concept, and that is to have existing up on top again with 2 travel lanes in each direction, but on the south side, go to 1 travel lane in each direction. And you could have a buffered bike lane, or you could have a fully separated bike lane, which is called Class 4, and it feels a lot safer. And that is actually being proposed. It was proposed by Caltrans, and it's included in the ATP grant as well. So that's the end of the bike recommendations that were summarized in the report. Here's the pedestrian recommendations that starts off by really pointing out a very interesting chart there that at 40 miles an hour, it's a 90% chance if a pedestrian is hit that you're not going to make it. When you get to 30, your odds are improving at 50%. But if you get down to 20, you've got a 90% chance of survival from a car hit by a pedestrian. So this is getting to the point about traffic calming. Everybody inherently knows it. When you see a car whipping by, you know up at 40 your chances are not good to be extra careful. Down around 20 is a point where a lot of times our streets we don't have dedicated sidewalks and people feel comfortable walking on quieter streets. So this is pointing out the goal of trying to calm traffic to help promote pedestrian safety and comfort, as well as bicycle comfort and safety. So here's the kind of a schematic of Ojai Avenue, and it's showing that so you can see some people are calling it the hinge. I don't know if that's a new term or not, but as you come in Ojai Avenue at Kenyatta, you've got the bend there, and there's some green there talking about converting unprotected to protected. So that means an existing crosswalk exists, but protect it with flashing beacons or other means. So the ATP project is proposing that crossing be protected with flashing beacons and some curb extensions, and the other 2 have some curb modifications at the corners and better signage. And then you can see at Blanche in front of the museum, same thing. That one, a lot of people zoom into town and put flashing beacons there would help the safety of that as well. So when you get to Signal Street, you can see the existing protected crossings, and you can see the middle of the arcade right above the 640, and that's existing unprotected. That's one of the calmest crosswalks we have. It still has its risky times at nighttime when there's no traffic and people can really accelerate through there. It can be dangerous. But it is a historic area in recognition of that. We're avoiding flashing beacons out in front of the arcade. So this plan kind of shows improvements that can help this whole corridor from Kenyatta all the way out to Whispering Oaks be improved with additional crosswalks and additional pedestrian corridor, improved corridor. Here's a project that's been talked about for some time around the city, was improving that strange alignment when you come up Signal and it shifts over as you turn onto Grant. And so we do have an existing grant that can help fund that. We have quite a few options that have been discussed. And this one, from input at that time, was promoting mini traffic circles at each intersection, the one at Signal Summer as well as up at Grand in Signal, and separated walking paths outside of it. And so there's another rough concept, but it would still obviously be refined before there's any final commitment. Here's the last step we just went through quickly, the bike and pedestrian improvements and the neighborhood traffic calming. I think an important point mentioned in the plan is that the neighborhood character is a key part of the city's charm, that it's very important that these things all not just function, but they look and feel aesthetically right for Ojai. So I wanted to highlight that because I don't think anybody's trying to hammer in any kind of a ugly pedestrian crosswalks you might have seen when you drive through Casita Springs. I think that's called a, can't think of the term right now, but it's a large light for pedestrians that goes over the road, the highway. It's called a HAWK, I guess is the acronym. I can't think of it. But you hit the button and it'll flash. I think that's even an advanced one that does a full stop, yellow stop and go. So we're not proposing that anyways on Ojai Avenue, nothing like that. There's not even there's recognition because of the charm of Ojai that nothing of that extreme level would go on. Mostly what we're talking about for pedestrian improvements are curb extensions, and it's a concept that still, like I say, would be approved and reviewed for each project. But you take the existing signage and you squeeze in that bar, which is called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, the ones that are existing at the library, and it really improves the safety of the crosswalk. And so here's an example of traffic calming. There's a toolbox, there's a whole array of different options that can be used in the report, but curb extensions, there's an example of a dozen or so that already exist around the city. So here's the one behind Westridge at the corner of Topatopa and Ventura Street. So it's got a nice sycamore grown in it. I think it's attractive. It can be done poorly, but, and I think there's a little possible history back on Montgomery Street that people bring up that was not done properly. On the other side, it can be done nicely. And then I even think Carpenter is a good example, a smaller city like ourselves that has had curb extensions all around town for 25 years, and they work great, and vehicles all make around the corners just fine. These mini traffic circles, they're common up in Sacramento and some communities. Santa Barbara has a fair amount, but that's another way to calm traffic, the toolbox. Some cities have these diverters where you can't use one lane, it's cut off, or a chicane where you just force the traffic. Any kind of a wide, straight street is going to promote fast traffic. And the flashing beacons like we were talking about. This is kind of growing in popularity. I was just visiting my brother in Colorado, and South Denver had a really neat street, Pearl Street, which has a big farmer's market, and they do this they have bicycle parklets in front of a lot of the coffee shops there. A little bit like our coffee shop downtown, though. Ojai Coffee Roasters is always packed with bicycles, and we were just talking today about that in Complete Streets, trying to get more, bike racks out there. So this can be done. I think you see it in San Francisco and Seattle, Portland areas, and so on, where they actually kind of take the parking area and make it into an outdoor seating, dining area. Could use it for bike parking and so on. This is actually a kind of a combo, right? It's got, dining, standing area as well as bike parking. Tree in the road can calm traffic. So that's coming over to City Hall here, Blanche, at the bike trail. This is a creative corner destination, kind of a new concept, but people are, instead of the cost and difficulties of physical flat work that affects drainage and costs a lot of money, some people are just painting them in to go out there and do this kind of thing. And I remember one time we went to a Complete Streets seminar down at UCLA, right? And they had just done this in Hollywood. They took over a whole end of a street and put planters out there, all kinds of large-scale 4-foot diameter type planters and paint like this. And it was a pretty amazing transformation of the area. But that's an inexpensive way to do it. Pretty flashy. A tool. I'm not sure how often we'll see that around town, but that's an option. So here's coming to the end here is the traffic calming improvement examples around town that were identified during the outreach effort. Was people looking for pedestrian improvements in the downtown area there, along Aliso, along Cañada. There was quite a few. I think most people know that an easy way to get up to the northeast part of town is you come in on Ojai Avenue and cut up Cañada across Summer onto Grand. So Cañada has pretty frequent complaints about speeding. So they're talking about pedestrian safety features there. And then you can see things like uphill bike lanes. If you're going to Kuyama to provide up a special bike lane, there's not enough width there to have up and downhill bike lanes. But and the same thing for Signal getting up to Shelf Road and the Valley View Preserve. So that shows a few concepts there, locations. And here is the intersection of Foothill, Aliso, and Bristol. And it's just got a lot of pavement. If you ever go up there, it's a huge area you can pull up. And so there's a lot of room to tighten that up and you could actually improve bike and pedestrian safety, or possibly a traffic circle. There's enough room there. And as the final slide here, the wrap-up would be that the capital improvement funding, we are fairly dependent on grant programs for funding, although there is money allocated in the capital improvement fund, and the city council's been very supportive of that. And that there has been some consideration for an in lieu fee to be considered to provide funding for complete streets projects as well. And that's kind of a potential ordinance modification and legal issue, and I think that's been discussed but never completely fleshed out. So I think that is the end, and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Chester?
I understand that Caltrans governs the speed limit on 33, correct?
Yes.
Because that's a major concern coming around Bristol. I really think that should be 25 miles an hour right there, because you come around that corner, you don't see that 35 mile an hour sign, that 25 mile an hour sign until you're around the corner, already going at 45 miles per hour. And I can see you've designated those safety walks right there, because that's probably the most dangerous spot, right there, coming around that corner. But can we petition that? Because that's something I think will help Ojai too, because we talked about also doing some curb extensions over by that where the Caros used to be, and close that in.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we got to do in order to incorporate speed limit control on 33?
And are you talking about from the Y into downtown primarily, right?
Yes.
Which would be 150.
Pretty
just
much from
clarify.
Bristol to downtown. I think
Right.
35 is good everywhere to Bristol, but from Bristol it should turn to 25, because it just goes around that corner, and then it's 35, when people are going 40, 45, and they turn the corner and it turns to 25, and you don't see it until you're there and you're downtown going 40 miles an hour.
And it is tricky because it's Caltrans right of way, and we worked with them a few years ago to modify. There used to be a 25 mile an hour sign that I think was all the way down in front of the Bank of America, but when you left town, it didn't change to 35 until up by Clough Vista.
Right.
So that took about 2 years
Wow.
to get that 25 mile an hour sign moved out to match there. So it has been moved out there, which is the primary corridor. And there's certain regulations about speed traps that you have to do speed surveys and take the 85th percentile of what the speeds are existing out there. And if you drive it below that, there is increasing movements at the state level to allow you to push it a little bit below. But if you move it below what those standard speeds are, it's considered a speed trap, and it won't hold up in court. But still, I think I want to emphasize that all these improvements we're talking about, adding bike lanes and sidewalks and parking, all these things signal to the driver that you're into town and that it's time to slow down, and it'll help. But that's mostly focused kind of in a Clough Vista Park area. And to the
That's
east.
too bad. Really, it's too bad that they have such control over such an important spot in downtown Ojai, which really affects all of us. And who are these people in Caltrans, and what do they care about us in Ojai? It just bugs me. So there's nothing. I know they are. Caltrans is very willing to turn it over to the city, but it's a huge expense to maintain that road that they take. They would. Yeah, but in decreasing the speed limit, what is their risk in that?
I think it's all about the speed trap issue. If you can,
Yeah, but it wouldn't be, if you think about it, in Bristol, that's the place to do it. You already have a traffic light. You're already slowing the traffic down. You're already into downtown. Why can't we change that to 25? This just makes total sense to me at that point. That's what it should be, especially when you're coming around a blind corner, going 40, 45 miles an hour, where there's a walkway literally right around the blind corner. Now, even if you put a signal there, which you're planning to do, I saw it on the map, you're already around the corner at 45, and there's someone crossing the street. It's just to me, it just sounds to have those people in control of something like that.
I think one answer too is
Isn't there a way to just,
There's certainly some political pressure the city can bring to bear. As Greg noted, the city doesn't directly control it unless we take over the entire maintenance of the road, which is a much larger question for the council. But I think it's clear that there's a need to reduce the speed limits there. And I know Greg will take it to council when this is, if approved, goes to council, and council can push Caltrans to reduce the speed limit in the appropriate place. One vehicle to help move that forward may be the fact that Caltrans is working with the city on the ATP project grant, which admittedly includes traffic calming improvements in a different part of Ojai Avenue.
Maricopa
but it's
Highway,
over
right.
up on Maricopa. But still, it indicates their willingness to invest
Right.
in this community and in our attempts to reduce the speed. That should give us some pressure to help bear upon the decision makers of Caltrans. But it's unfortunately not something we directly control.
Right.
And if those improvements, the engineered improvements, sidewalk, bike lanes, and everything else, drop the speed, and you can survey the 85th, you can drop it to 5 miles per hour below it. So it might be that we could take the 35 down to 30. It's not bad.
Right.
And so we could see what we can do.
And how
to
about
drop
just
it.
moving the sign? That's the other thing.
Right.
The sign, you don't see the 25 until you're completely around the corner.
I mean, I think it's all up the same alley as this plan, is to try to calm it and make it safer for bikes and pedestrian. It's the exact same issue. And the Caltrans thing is always it's amazing how
Yeah, but
long
we
it
made a
takes.
lot of headway with them on the Maricopa. I was at that meeting, with MAC meeting, that you presented the plan for that grant for the Maricopa, to narrow Maricopa Highway down to 2 lanes for the bike lanes, and they seem to be very much, in favor of that. I just don't see where any opposition would come to reduce speed.
And that's a good example. I mean, the speed limit in front of the high school is 35.
Yeah.
But if we go to 2 lanes, one in each direction, and have traffic calming features for pedestrian crosswalks, the actual speeds will drop down.
Right, based
So
on
when they-
the construction of the road.
So that
And-
35, we might be able to knock down to 30 in that zone after we survey it. But to do it up front, I'll be glad to check into it more, but I know it's usually a
I
difficult task.
really would like you to do that, if you
Mhm.
wouldn't mind, because to me, all the safety slowing down the traffic is the big part of safety. And if we have no control of what happens on 33, what's the point?
Mhm.
I mean, geez.
Exactly.
That's one area that I really think is important. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chester. Other questions for Mr. Grant? Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, and I have 2 speakers cards. One is from Ron Polito.
Good evening. My name is Ron Polito, and those of you who don't know what my place in Ojai is, among other things, I own the corner of Kenyatta and Ojai Avenue. I have 5 buildings downtown, 27 tenants, and over 105 employees. So I think I'm rather uniquely qualified to make a few comments, and it is very early on. I get it. Greg was very generous with his time this morning on the phone and explained to me this is early, but I need to bring it up early because sometimes things are seen as conceptual, but they become cast in concrete. And the reason I bring this up is, and John, you were in the trenches with me.
Yep.
I went through 2 planning commissions, 2 city managers, 2 architects to get the Abello project approved. And the reason why it got approved and built, and it's beautiful and impeccably maintained, is because it was we worked together hand in hand. My architect sat down with the city people, and we made it work. We gave the planning commission the vision that they wanted. We gave them that exact product at that intersection, because that was the intersection. That's where you come into Ojai. You make that turn, which they go too fast. And what's the first thing you see as you make that turn? You see that corner. Then you see the transition onto Ojai Avenue, and you see Topa Topa. It's a clear shot of the mountains. Now, in the conceptual plan of the 2 charrettes I've been to, there's a median on Ojai Avenue starting at Kenyatta, a landscape median. I think the reworking of Kenyatta is a great idea to slow traffic down. I'm with you 100%. However, in the concept, they showed trees going down Ojai Avenue starting at Kenyatta Street. Now, 2 concerns. It's going to take out the visibility of my building and hurt my tenants. I already have London shade trees planted as part of the Tree Street plant program, whatever it's called. John, you know the correct term. Those trees are not across the street from me. Those trees should be planted across the street on the other side, and that's what the plan calls out for, but it's never been done. So my concern is, with this charrette and these drawings, which you're not seeing here tonight, people are seeing trees there, and they're going to assume that's the way it is. and that's the way it's supposed to be. Well, that's improper planning. And I approached Dave Sargent at the first charrette, and I says, Dave, I've known you for 20 years. What are you doing with these trees in the middle of the street? And you're going to obscure. He said, that was just a concept, probably something low-lying vegetation. It would be much better to preserve the architectural view coming down Ojai. So I just want to bring that out tonight, so it's on everybody's minds as we all walk through this very daunting project, because this is a very complicated and daunting project. And I think at this point, that's all I want to leave you with, and I encourage everybody to work really hard with Greg and his staff. This is a big one. This is a big one, and Ojai, everything little is big, so this is big, big. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. I have a card from Russell Sidney.
Planning Commissioners, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to this. I'm Russell Sidney. I'm the Executive Director of the Ojai Valley Green Coalition, and I work with the Complete Streets Committee, as several of you know, and we've been working really hard to create this document. It represents a solid addition to the pedestrian and bicycle safety planning for our community. Please do what you can to advance this to becoming an official document. The Green Coalition has worked hard to get input and support for this document from the bicycle community. We work with the Bicycle Coalition. We've developed a bicycle advocacy group, and all of them are very concerned that we get this document to move forward and become part of what we need to be able to take the next steps and really go about doing the things that we need to do to turn this into a bicycle-safe community. There's so many people that are concerned about that, just in part because we love to ride. We love the idea of living in a community that has active, healthy transportation, where we are able to free ourselves from our dependence on using vehicles to do the things we need in our daily life. And by freeing ourselves from those vehicles, we're also doing what we need to do to pick up where the Paris Climate Accord left off. And evidently, it's up to people like us to take that on. So not only would it allow us to do our part to reduce greenhouse gases, but also to be able to break our dependence on fossil fuels. This document is important because it becomes part of the foundation we need to get the additional funding, part of the foundation we need to get the community support. And just to make it clear, the concerns about the plans that our business community leader expressed is actually not in this document. It's in the Active Transportation Program document. So that would not be an impediment to moving forward with this document, and we do intend to deal with all of the other concerns. I know that all of us on the Complete Streets Committee are looking at all the details, including the ones that were raised in terms of supporting a local business community. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Sidney. I have a card from Renee Roth.
Good evening. My name is Renee Roth. I live in Ojai. So as somebody who has participated a little bit in this process, kind of on the outskirts, I would just like to give a little bit of what my resident view of what happened in this process a little bit, just to make a couple of quick comments. This is the first time I've seen this document. I was out of commission for a couple months there, but I do want to note that in the plan it does talk about slowing down and safety and reducing speed, and I really appreciate your comment, Chester. That was one of my most important things, is what is being done to slow down the speeds. And I do remember in previous meetings of the Complete Streets Committee, we talked about what if we could slow the speeds down as soon as you hit the Y to the other end of town to 25, period. And I mentioned that at the Complete Streets meeting today and asked Greg, is anybody working on slowing down traffic? And it's not being worked on. And this is something that I do think will have a huge impact on safety, pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, is trying to figure out a way to do it. Maybe it starts with pedestrian crosswalks and making a big yellow, green, flashing beacon pedestrian crosswalk at that corner when you turn on to Kenyatta. You're going 35 miles an hour down the hill and around the corner to a speed sign that says 25 miles an hour. It does not make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So I have big concerns about that. The other thing I just want to mention is there was a community neighborhood group that did try to do a little bit of that creative corner painting. And it's really disappointing to me that we had members of the community saying, we want to try this. We're a neighborhood community. We're right there around the street from Bart's Books. And they basically got dropped. There was no way for a community neighborhood group to have access or input into this process. And I just need to say that because it's really disappointing. They brought in a speaker from Portland. Kathy knows about it. The speaker from Portland is the one who did all of the redesign of the streets up in Portland and made a lot of changes and improvements. So that was a missed opportunity that I think we really need to figure out a way to look at cheap, cost-effective, engaging opportunities to include members of the community in this process. And then the last thing I'd like to say is I think this is a great plan. I think it's a great starting point. I would like to see an action plan or what we can do now or what our priorities now are. It seems like we're focused a lot on grants and getting big grants to make changes, but I do think there are little things that we can do that can engage the community in the process and have us all feel like we're being updated and included and making the community safer so that bicycle and pedestrian safety is number one on everybody's minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this issue? Susan, I'm sure you have things to say about this, but you don't have to.
Where to start?
Well, I do know that this is Susan Francina, and I'm a member of the all the bicycle clubs in Ojai, including the Complete Streets Committee. I know that we started working on this back in 1994, when I founded the first Ojai Bicycle Coalition, and we adopted the first plan, I think, by the year 1998. And so I'm familiar with all these discussions, and I agree with Renee. We'd like to see an action plan. I want to assure Renee that we are working to slow down the traffic. But one simple thing that I've advocated, I think, when I first was on the council in 1996, was a sign in the entrance to Ojai that says, "Welcome to Ojai, slow down." I think there needs to be, and it should be on every piece of tourist information, all the hotels, that this is a place, and I know there's at least 3 council members who've discussed a 25 mile per hour speed limit valley-wide, or at least, so it's not confusing that, 3 feet later it's 35, all of that is old thinking. Our streets in Ojai were never designed for wide SUVs. We have narrow lanes for the most part, not every street. And there's so much outdated stuff out there that I think we could change for very little money. I mean, many of the things that we want to do that are expensive, we wouldn't have to do if everybody just went 25 miles per hour. That would solve, about 90% of the issues. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it would solve a lot of issues. What was my main point? I know that the City Council is very much in favor of moving this forward, and I look forward to being a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else like to speak? Jeez, we're overwhelmed with City Council people today.
Yeah, I want to concur with what Susan's I really consider myself an ally with Sousa and what she wants to do in terms of advancing bike paths in the city. And I think the importance of advancing this plan beyond the foundation for leveraging tax dollars with grants and things like that is also to integrate the principles into our overall street overlay program. And I think once we have an adopted policy, once it's worked through the Planning Commission, gets to the Commission, and, you know, apologies to Mr. Grant, but I want to complicate his street overlay program by integrating traffic calming, opportunistic traffic calming designs into our street overlay program when the soil is right, when the opportunity is right. And once we have an adopted policy by council, then you've got clear direction, and it's not kind of ambiguous what that direction is, and that would, I think, advance what I certainly want to see. So that's one of the reasons I urge adoption of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else in the public? Yes, ma'am. Just come up and let us know your name and address and stuff.
Well, this is kind of silly, but hello, my name is Vivian Chinelli, and I live next to the bowling alley, but I just realized what you just said about signs and 25. So Ojai Drive, 25. I just realized drive and 25 rhyme. So just a simple sign, Ojai Drive, 25. That's all I had to say. It just.
Thank you very much. I like that. Anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and return this to the Planning Commission. We've heard a lot of input from everybody. Do we have more discussion on this? You may.
Well, as chair of the Complete Streets Subcommittee, first of all, I have a lot of thank yous that I want to put out to a lot of people. And actually, John, you were on the original Complete Streets that started in 2010, and I just wanted to say that basically there was a state mandate that we were assigned the task of creating the policy. So the Complete Streets Subcommittee helped the city staff create the policy. When the policy was done, we essentially were supposed to be done as far as a committee goes. And I spoke to a couple of my fellow commissioners, and we just went, God, it's probably just going to sit on the shelf and get dusty. I went to City Council, and I asked if we could continue as a standing committee and if we could do an implementation plan. And at the time, there wasn't any funding at the city. That's why the Planning Commission was assigned to do these ordinances. There was more than just this ordinance. And so I want to, first of all, I want to thank the City Council for having the foresight to say yes and allow us to do that. I also want to thank Greg Grant, our Public Works Director, and his staff, who, our group is very lively. We have sometimes heated discussions and what have you. We do a lot of work. But Greg has been there nonstop and has done a phenomenal job. In other words, this ATP grant and even getting this document moved forward probably would not have happened without you. So I really want to thank you. I also want to mention that we have, in addition to presently Commissioner Quillisi and myself are the two planning commissioners on Complete Streets, we have from the start and continue to this day have members of the public who have come every month, and in addition we've done like a lot of field work, we've had other meetings outside of our regular meetings who come faithfully and have been part of this process. So when I'm just giving you a little background here because I just feel like it needed to be said. So when we asked City Council for approval, we didn't have any money to hire a consultant. So I said, is it okay if we try to get a grant? So we actually tried for two very large grants that were going to be not only the Complete Streets, at the time we were calling it an implementation plan, it was going to have a general plan update and some major projects, and I got buy-in from Caltrans, which was huge. We missed it by 1 point, unfortunately. Tried to get on a second round, and then it was after that that Greg said he had discovered that extra funding that was left over from an old grant, and that's why we were allowed to finally, after, we started this in 2012, by the way, so we got to finally have a consultant help us. But members of the public went out, we walked the streets, we clocked speeds, we've measured streets, we've documented how many bike riders and pedestrians, people in wheelchairs and moms with strollers, all kinds of information that we put on these walkability index sheets, and most recently they were entered into a GIS program. All of that information that we did was given to the consultants in addition to more. So we basically gave them a lot of the groundwork when they got started. And then they had the workshop, and then after that, our committee helped review and actually helped write a lot of this master plan that you're looking at. So I just really want to thank our staff here at the city, our city council, Sousa for being a cheerleader and making things happen years ago, and all the members of the public, and my fellow planning commissioners who have worked on this. A lot of work has gone into it, and I'm really excited about it, and I just wanted to share that with my fellow commissioners and members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nolan. Yes, sir. Chester.
I understand that this is an implementation strategy, correct? Is there any way we can incorporate something else into this document at this time, or is this something that we're just going to improve?
It's presented to the planning commission for their discussion and recommendation to the council. You have the ability to recommend
Okay, I'd like to
changes.
make one recommendation that as far, one of the I'd like to add an implementation strategy of emphasis of working with Caltrans in reducing the speed. Somewhere that's nowhere written in this plan, and I'd really like to have that in there as a strategy. Whatever we can do, we should start putting pressure on them, because ultimately that is the most effective way to control pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So I think if we can incorporate that as a strategy, because again, I understand there's a lot of issues with that, but if it's not there as a primary strategy, it's going to get lost, because I think it is a primary strategy. So that's my recommendation.
Great, thank you. Other comments, or if Mr. Quillisi? I'm sure you've got thousands of comments.
Thank you. No, I would like to thank Commissioner Nolan as well. She's been a Trojan leading this motley crew for I'm not sure how many years now. Once a month getting together, trying to put this together. And Greg Grant, who is, we talk about traffic calming here. Greg is the committee calming force that we have. He understands what can be done and what can't be done, and gently reminds us when we've crossed from one to the other. And I very much appreciate that. As far as Chester, I'm happy to see some words added. You're looking at the first page, I think.
Sure.
Here, and you want to just add some words about emphasis on Caltrans and lower speed limits?
Well, yeah, a strategy to negotiate with Caltrans to reduce speed limits. That's simple.
Yeah, I think that's something that is on Greg Grant's plate right now as he works through all of these various things, crosswalks and all the rest. But I'm happy to add some words on that first page
I would like that.
about speed limits and Caltrans.
Caltrans especially.
Yeah. The speed limits elsewhere are under our control.
Under our control,
Yeah.
so it's not something, I mean, the strategy of reducing speed is the overall strategy, but 33 is a kind of unique situation.
Even 150 also. correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
true.
the
150,
Caltrans
33.
emphasis does seem to be on slowing the traffic on 33.
Right. and-
Particularly around the high
I've
school.
been into a few recent meetings with them, and they seem very amenable to it. So I really think it's a very, it's an incorporated strategy I'd like to just emphasize in the report, that's all.
And separate from the ATP grant, we have another grant that'll give us some crosswalks around the high school and maybe at Valerio as well.
Right.
So,
All right. Yeah, Ray.
I'm very excited to see this. I've been hearing about it for so long, and it feels tangible now, and I can hold it and flip pages. And one thing I'm curious about, just, it wouldn't be an addition, I'm just curious if it was part of the conversation as this was being created. was if there was discussion about another public parking lot somewhere where people could park outside of town, rent bikes out, over by the Y or something, right in, or another location. Parking seems to be a challenge. If people had the opportunity and the signage was there and they could park outside of the congested area and then have a means to get in, if they're healthy, to ride a bike or extra trolley stop or something like that. Was there discussion of anything about that?
If I could address that, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, because that's exactly the intention of this plan, and I think it even addressed that up front in the administrative report as a goal in the circulation element, is to try to reduce the need for parking. So obviously, I think we were discussing that today in Complete Streets, that, every bike or two in town is equivalent to a car, and it sure takes up a lot less space and pollutes and everything else a lot less. So we do have that, and that's a good point. We can try to, we do, I think we oftentimes forget that Rotary Park, we have that park and ride area that is barely used. So maybe better signage there. It's right at the Ojai Valley Bike Trail. It's a perfect place to hop off and get on your bike and ride downtown. And so we could try to add that as a note. It's part of the implementation to try to promote in general the concept parking in the outskirts of town and riding a bike.
Yeah, that rotary parking, it's pretty easy to just zip on by there and miss that it's there or why it's there. We see rental bikes from the inn and rental bikes from, I always forget Kelly's store.
The mob
shop, but there isn't anything further down the highway where people can grab a bike and ride in. And in terms of the trolley schedule, I know that's pretty set, but maybe there's one that somehow we could get something that just went from the Rotary
right
downtown.
Part of this ATP project really improves the crosswalk ability at the Y, and so I don't want to promote parking at the Vaughn's private parking lot, but certainly there's a great trolley stop right there, so people want to ride the trolley in, they can do it from there. And they can, or they can park over at the Rotary and just cross the street to get onto that trolley stop as well. But we can add that as I think these two, so far anyways, these two comments are very relatively straightforward that we can add into the plan and commit to that and make sure we highlight that when it goes to council that these things were addressed.
Yeah, it seems like we have resources already in place. It's just people pass by them because the signage isn't there or it's not in the marketing materials or...
Especially coming to town this way, coming in from the Ventura side, coming in from the from the upper Ojai side. I'm not sure if there's really demand there anyways, but certainly there's roadside Ojai Avenue parking that people could hop off and ride. Mm-hmm. Or maybe down on Bryant Street, hop on the bike trail.
Yeah.
That's part of what what's the new spot down on Bryant Street, the
Caravan Outpost.
Caravan Outpost, right. I mean, they've got a pile of bikes there, and you always see them downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a popular part of that place.
And the white ones from the inn, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grant.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
I think we need to emphasize, we that have been on the Complete Streets Committee and including all of the non-governmental or non-commission people that come as often as they do, first of all, what you see here in this report did not come together last week. Some of the format may have, but the content is within the last few months that we've brought it all together. And as our discussions continue at our monthly Complete Streets Committee meetings, and by the way, it's the first Wednesday of every month at 2:30, and it runs until roughly 5 o'clock, so we have a chance to decompress before starting all of this. But we have, our discussions at the Complete Streets Committee have continued well beyond what is here. And I think the feeling of the committee is that we would like to see this as a basis for complete streets planning moved forward to the city council as we look at refining, adding to it, whatever, and through that process we can bring additional changes, adds, whatever, to the city council to to make the plan even better. But the longer that we spend thinking about it or trying to make it perfect, you know the old saying, perfect is the enemy of good enough. I think that this plan that we have here, and I'm biased because I've been on the committee, but I think it is better than good enough as a starting point for complete streets addition to policy in the city. And I'd like to see us move it along, whether we add a few words about speed limits or Caltrans or the Rotary parking lot or whatever, all that's fine, and it wouldn't be hard to change this. But I do think that we need to give this to City Council with our conceptual endorsement and continue to work on refining it.
Great. Yeah, right.
I'm just ideating here. I wonder if there's a way to create an incentive, because that's fascinating that you said every 2 bikes equals a car.
1 or 2.
1 or 2 cars. So I wonder if there's some kind of incentive or to make bicycles available at every hotel in Ojai. So every bicycle has some size of fleet. So the cars are left there, and then the people ride in.
That seems to be happening already. Yeah. Kathleen?
It's happening slowly and evolving, and I don't know if the mob shop is who's supplying all of that, and they need to expand their business, or.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, Commissioner Nolan?
Yeah.
Oh, just to comment on the hotels and the bike parking. So, well, the Ojai Valley Inn has a program. They have over 200 bikes for their people that stay there that anyone can just use. In addition, they've collaborated with the mob shop. So the mob shop takes care of their bikes, and you can rent more specific bikes other than like a road cruiser bike. Then Sunido, I believe, has bikes. I think the Rancho now does. Most of the hotels now, the bigger ones, do have bikes. So, and they're encouraging the people that come and stay at the hotels to use the bikes. Which, one thing I wanted to point out, and I've noticed this recently, more and more of those people are out on the streets. And I think something we need to look at is maybe coming up with a brochure or something that is either at the visitor centers or the hotels have, and it's pretty much about bicycle safety and bicycle rules, because you see people on the sidewalks, you see people on the wrong side of the street and crossing. So that's, our work is never ending here.
It'd be interesting to collect the data of how many hotels there are cumulatively and how many bikes there are amongst those hotels. So if there's a 50-room hotel, are there 30 bikes at that hotel? And collect that data and see where the holes are, and then try to fill that in. Yeah.
Mr. Grant?
I want to mention that, you might have heard, like we were talking about the Caravan Outpost, they have quite a pool. And then I think 200 of those Linus bikes were donated to the Ojai Valley Inn, so you see those around town. And I wanted to ask the city council, right now we have a provision in the code which says that complete streets measures can be required in discretionary commercial permits. So it would seem that we would have the ability to require, just like you can require a bike rack or any other such, so I'm going to refer it to.
As a project that generates traffic demand that would in part be offset by bicycle usage comes up for permits, we would have the power to impose conditions that would require both providing bicycle parking, as we often do, or as you often do, and also require provision of a bike fleet. It becomes a smidge more complicated for existing hotels that aren't coming in for new permits. We'll put our thinking caps on for that one. And I think also the data question is a good question too. And it's worth noting, as the last point, as seems evident to me and just in my own travels, the market right now demands bicycle rental for any kind of destination hotel above a certain price point. And so we can also rely on the market. But certainly the power exists for the city to impose it as a condition with the right facts in place.
Thank you. Mr. Quillisi, you prepared to make a motion on this yet?
Yes.
You seemed very enthusiastic about it.
I move that the commission recommend to the city council that they adopt this Complete Streets Master Plan as an implementation strategy of the city's 2012 Complete Streets Policy.
I'll take the liberty of seconding that.
Do we have a discussion?
Oh,
We can
as-
have discussion.
Yeah,
yes.
as amended.
Well, I'd like
Well,
to add
yes,
it.
there are those,
Yeah,
the two things we discussed tonight, we want to include in there.
okay. You want to add that to your,
And I'll say as amended, pending a more precise explication of what the amendments are.
One is about encouraging Caltrans to reduce speeds
or
throughout the city.
negotiating with Caltrans
Yeah.
to get them to reduce speeds?
And the other is about provisions for parking
Yeah.
when people first come to the city. Those are the two changes.
You want to include
And-
bike at motel, hotel, promotion of bike fleet at.
I'm not sure what the legal way would be to do that, but
Perhaps in this moment, phrase it as promote as opportunities arise, encouragement of bike parking at hotels. And then we'll look at the second,
Parking and rental?
bike parking and rental, right. And then we'll look at the second piece of requiring it for existing hotels. That's a separate question that needs much more analysis than we can do at this moment.
And I'm not sure where those words would go right now. It seems that Chester's words could go at the end of the third paragraph on section 1, under a plan for Ojai. We could say it's created as an implementation strategy for the city's 2012 Complete Streets Policy, and will emphasize working with Caltrans to lower speed limits on the roadways that they're responsible for.
Highway 150
Something
and
like that.
33. Yeah, just 33 and 150. Yeah, city.
Oh, okay, okay. Working with Caltrans to lower speed limits on 33
And 150.
and 150.
All right.
I'm happy with that amendment to my motion.
as am I. Any other discussion about this? Chester?
I'll second it.
Well, I already
Oh, you seconded it.
Yeah, I jumped right in, you know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you probably should have. All right, could we have a roll call on this, please?
Jagiello?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Quilisi?
Yes.
Merk?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
All right, thank you all. I really appreciate the work that was done over the last 7 years.
Informal information item.
Yeah, you can come up here, yeah.
But you don't want to get captured on the video.
There came a cry from the audience at last.
I don't know if you know or are aware that Boku, the new business at the entrance, to Ojai near the Y, they are very, very they want to be they're bicycle advocates. They want to be bicycle friendly. They want to do everything possible. And I've talked to them at length to make Ojai, a big bicycle friendly town. So they're there, and they have so much space and parking. So maybe that's another opportunity for people to park on the outskirts. And then I'm so glad that Chester made that amendment or that addition, because what I'm going to do before this comes before the council is document the number of deaths on Ojai Avenue, and I think that should be in the document, because that will strengthen our case to lower the speed limit.
Yeah,
There have been at least 4, 5, 6 deaths.
Greg's negotiations.
Yeah, it increases, when I met with Caltrans during when they were planning that intersection on 33 and Creek Road.
Yes.
The more you can emphasize that, there's a rating that they use.
Yes,
To
yeah.
prioritize their condition, and obviously death is the biggest thing that ups their rating. So that
Yeah.
would be very good.
Yes.
For them to prioritize that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your help on this. Yes. I'm going to take the liberty of changing our agenda a little bit, because I know we have a lot of people here for item 5, which is the conceptual review for a new restaurant. So I'm going to move that up, and we will discuss the sign ordinance afterwards. So we're going to go to item 5, which is a conceptual review, CR 1703, for a new restaurant with outdoor dining, a brewery with a bar and a multipurpose room, outdoor container storage area, and a commercial swimming pool, along with associated improvements on the site of the former Ojai Valley Bowling Alley. And Mr. Winiger, could you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as you indicated, this is a conceptual review. Jay Higgins was also the project planner on this, and will give you a brief staff report.
Chairman Merck, Jay Higgins with the Community Development Department. You've seen the project in another form fairly recently, in March, I believe, the applicant did take your comments and incorporated them and revised the site plan. Going back further in time, of course, we've provided a little history about how many times the site has been to the commission over the years for a change. Very much a popular site in our department in terms of people coming in and pulling the file, and we're trying to work with people as they come in to do something there. It does have some limitations, of course, but it's a very popular site. So the staff report outlines those things that you've seen in March in terms of development standards that we think would apply. Of course, it's a concept level review. The details of the plans are not the precise level that we would ordinarily have. So in terms of parking calculations or more precise definition of the uses, we've given some guidance statements therein, and it's the usual set of circumstances with regard to architecture, circulation, site planning, parking, noise, certainly conformance to some of the design guidelines that are in front of you as well. But we are encouraging you to give the applicant additional details and further direction so that a full submittal can be made, and we have all the answers to all the questions that we could ever think of. So I can answer any of your questions right now. We can certainly turn it over to the applicant if he's available for a presentation, and we don't have any further information for you other than what's in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Higgins? Yes, Mr. Quilisi.
Thank you.
Mr.
Jay,
Higgins, could you stay back?
question. In the admin report, page 5, there is a discussion of CEQA guidelines and then the city's circulation and air quality elements. The CEQA says at this time there are 0 traffic trips, and has been for 20 years, associated with the property. Okay? And so it implies at least that if we look at the impact, we have to start with a 0 baseline. On the other hand, the city and Ventura County project practice is to compare to the baseline of traffic generation that existed in 1984, which, however big it is bigger than 0. And so which baseline are we using to judge the traffic impact?
Chairman Merck and Commissioner Quilisi, that is a fundamental question for this property. So, and you essentially will have 2 sets of traffic data. One based on how we filter the project through our general plan policies, which allow us, or the practice has been in.
That's the 1984 stuff.
Correct, and on the corner of my eye, I see our attorney reaching for his microphone, so he'll jump in anytime when I start to strangle myself with this stuff. But there's 2 sets of filters, right? The general plan policies and then CEQA, and CEQA is really the animal that needs the most analysis on it. It just simply doesn't lend itself to quote-unquote credits. We need to do some analysis based on what the quote-unquote baseline is. The baseline is what's the use of the site now. There are some evolving legal interpretations or cases about what baseline means. We're simply not equipped at this time to really give it more analysis other than the general framework that you see in the staff report. I think it comes down to, and this is where Matt will jump in too, and I'd like him to, but we can do what we can to analyze a project under CEQA and mitigate. And if we mitigate successfully, then the project is theoretically approvable.
Okay. On page 6 of 9, your parking section, the first intended paragraph mentions that the applicant, has asked, or has counted the indoor dining but not the outdoor dining areas for purposes of generating sufficient parking spaces. Is that legal? If an application came in with both indoor and outdoor dining areas and the specific number of parking spaces that are proposed here, would that be contrary to or in conformance with the city code?
Chairman Merck and Commissioner Quilisi, the code doesn't give, our zoning code doesn't give us explicit guidance on how to count outdoor dining for parking demand. Like it does, it's get the tables, say, residential, commercial, hotel, and what have you, and it breaks down retail, commercial uses into certain kinds of restaurants, fast food, seating, seated establishments and whatnot. So, but it doesn't say, well, if it's got a patio, you can add another 500 or one space per 500, for example. It just doesn't say that. The ITE trip manuals will tend to be liberal with restaurants that have outdoor seating, given that that's a popular thing to do. And so some trip generation can be used to extrapolate what the parking is or should be. The code simply gives you the guidance to add more parking if you think it is going to be a problem. But again, we would rely on a project like this that has a combination of uses that could have a shared parking demand, not a cumulative, but a less than the sum of the parts type of demand, and then give you the discretion to agree with a parking demand study like that would come in from a third party.
And one key point to bear in mind on that is that this is a type of project where we would expect, and I believe has been submitted or will be submitted, a parking demand study to kind of go into the depth and not just rely on the code tables that set for parking standards for different land uses, because we have land uses, the particular outdoor dining, that don't have a line in the code. And a parking demand study provides the opportunity for the applicant to demonstrate to the commission's satisfaction that there is a need, if they so choose, for less parking because of the expected economies of shared use that derive from allowing, for example, your peak time for your meeting room may not be the same as your peak time for your pool usage. So you can have a little bit of overlap in the parking. But before you,
one could freely speculate that people that are staying at the motels that are immediately to the east of this would walk over and generate no traffic. And that speculation would not be provable either way.
Well, it's about what the commission is willing to accept as a reasonable assumption on something like that. Would you accept a 5% reduction in trips given the motels nearby 10%, 30%? Maybe that's too high, maybe 5 is too low, maybe 10 is where you'd set. Something like that. There's a bit of a reasonableness test that comes into this as well. But certainly the parking study, once presented to you for full approval, should provide the basis for whatever the parking number that they're proposing. And part of the commission's role in looking at that time will be testing that study. Certainly with staff's recommendation is part of your set of facts available before you as you're testing that parking study.
And I might add, Commissioner Quilisi, with a complete streets policy fully developed and implemented, we hope people are going to ride bikes to the joint too. So,
well, and it's worth pointing out directly that this would be a suitable project to consider requiring bike parking as part of the conditions.
Again, it just comes in the form of a third-party study that would maybe look at comps on similar projects, not in Ojai, but other communities, as to what the actual demand. Consultant goes and actually counts trips and parking demand on a similar mixed-use type of project and uses that to justify the decrease relative to the sum of the parts.
Okay. I have a question that may be for you, maybe for Mr. Summers. On page 7 of 9 in the admin report, the water and sewer paragraph, it says can and will serve letters from utilities are required for this. I know the city council has just taken the city out of the business of requiring can and will serve letters for ADUs and perhaps for new residential building, I'm not sure.
Just ADUs at this time.
Just ADUs, okay. So is it still a requirement because this is in the commercial zone, or is there some other part of the code that makes this a requirement?
It's a requirement as one of the lines required to secure approval for a design review permit. It's also required because this project will involve new plumbing facilities and new plumbing facilities that generate both sewage and need potable water, and that's required by the building code. The council's action to lift the will serve requirement lifted it for both of those, but only for ADUs. Or to be more accurate, the council's requirement lifted it for ADUs because ADUs are subject to the building code except as modified by council. ADUs were never subject to the requirement in the design review permit sections to have a will-serve letter because ADUs are not subject to design review permits unless they involve two-story construction. But the council lifted it even for those.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what I have for now. I do have questions for the applicant, so.
Okay, Ray?
Commissioner Quillisi's first question, and you said you wanted to refer to Matt, and then Matt didn't respond, and I would like to hear your response.
I was waiting for the other question of Commissioner Quillisi, but I'm happy to speak to those points. You jumped right to your next question there. The baseline here is two baselines. It's two different standards, two different baselines. The first standard issue is CEQA, as Jay noted, or Mr. Higgins noted. CEQA tests what is on the ground now and what is proposed, and how do those compare? What are the potentially significant environmental impacts of what is proposed versus what exists now? CEQA doesn't look at what existed in the past, and there's a couple of cases that have made that point plain. One in particular fairly recently out of the Bay Area in 2012, looked at it from a slightly different angle, but set the clear rule. In that case, a refinery had permits that let them issue up to a certain level, say 100 of a type of pollutant, but they were only they were only emitting 50, and they were doing some remodels to their refinery, and they argued, oh, we should be able to count our baseline as what were permitted up at 100, and the court said, no, your baseline is what you emitted last year. Your baseline is the 50. So applying the rule here, the baseline for CEQA is 0. This building has been vacant for 20-odd years. Parking, the traffic is 0, and all the other impacts are starting at 0, with perhaps of aesthetics, which is currently a negative situation. So CEQA is testing it against that 0 baseline, and the analysis will be, are they exempt? And if not exempt, can they mitigate the added traffic and added associated impacts through the typical menu of mitigation measures we have for a CEQA project? In particular, on traffic, you're looking at ways to reduce traffic, hours of operations adjustments, adjusting their peak demand levels, working together with the hotels that are going to be some of their patrons to ensure shuttles, bike parking, pedestrian access, encouraging bike usage. Maybe they would pay for some bike improvements on the front of their property or on Golden West to increase the level of bike usage and thus reduce the level of car usage. And the same thing with pedestrian improvements to increase the number of people walking, reducing the number of people driving to their property, reducing their traffic impacts. And then they have to get to the point of either mitigating the impacts that are identified to a less than significant level to secure approval through a mitigated neg deck or a notice of negative declaration, or else if it turns out that there's impacts they can't mitigate to less than a potentially significant level, then the project could be approved by the city council through an EIR and a statement of overriding considerations. I'm not saying that we have to go there to the applicant. Don't fret too yet. I expect that the impacts in this project can be mitigated to below significance levels with appropriate measures, but there's a path to get there. And the key with CEQA is to remember that CEQA is a disclosure document. It requires identification and analysis of environmental impacts, but if you have an impact, the city may still approve a project, notwithstanding despite that impact, through the EIR and statement of overriding considerations process. By contrast, the second baseline, the second policy issue, is the city's circulation and air quality elements, which together with the county are built in to require no new trips at the Edison curve on Highway 33 through Casita Springs. And there's no new peak hour trips, not no new trips, period. And that policy cannot be overridden with an SOC. That policy stands. It's a general plan policy. The council can change it by rewriting the general plan. There's no other way to change it. So thus it's a different in them. But the baseline for that policy is not 0. The baseline is the traffic that was in place in 1984. The reason being that the policy was adopted to ensure that the traffic situation at that curve would not get worse than it was at the time it was adopted. Whereas CEQA asks what's happening now. So that's why there's two different studies, one study that can analyze two different questions, two different baselines, and two different possible outcomes. CEQA you can mitigate and still approve with the general plan policy. they need to demonstrate through their mitigation measures, through their traffic reduction approaches, through the structure of their project, that they will have not more than one peak hour trip at the Edison curve through Casita Springs on Highway 33 in order to be able to be consistent with the general plan. Does that clarify the issue? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? This is a public hearing. Actually, we need to hear from the applicant first. Sorry, Mark. I was jumping ahead there.
Good evening, members of the commission, members of the staff. I'd like to start off by saying how very pleased I am and the applicants were of the staff report. It was very comprehensive and it gave us a really good picture of the challenges of this project and especially this traffic. I think I'm finally getting it. If you guys haven't got it yet, it's taken me a while to get it. I'm finally getting it and understanding this traffic issue. And the good news for us is that the bowling alley baseline traffic was really high. It was a lot of traffic that was generated. And we did have a preliminary traffic study performed to make sure this project was we could do it. And we're way under that baseline for the Edison curve traffic. But we do need to mitigate the traffic for our local streets and whatnot. And we hope to work with staff and come up with some good ideas to do that. This is our third concept review, and we're back with a new design based on the feedback from the last concept review. We heard the concerns of the neighbors and concerns of you folks that the noise, that we were orienting the noise towards the back of the property, towards the neighbors, and there is a noise ordinance, and we did engage a acoustical engineer and got some feedback from him, and he said we really need to bring the noise in, and so we developed a new structure to contain any kind of loud activities that might occur on the site, and that's implemented in this new plan. We also brought the main activities of the site up to the street and are aiming the noise away from the neighborhood and out to the golf course. And so we feel that with this new design, we can meet the noise ordinances and be okay with that. With that design, with this new design, we did have to bring in the delivery off of Golden West. And we're proposing a new turnout in the medium, which we have been talking to Public Works about, and they feel it's feasible to bring the delivery and the beer operations to through Golden West and into the site through kind of a back gated area that'd be screened off, and it wouldn't have a visual impact to Golden West, but there would be the trucks coming in and out of there. But the main entrance and most of the traffic will be coming from the from the Ojai Avenue side. As far as parking, I think that's a really good question. I think actually our next phase will be to engage the traffic engineer, and I think the traffic and the parking is going to basically drive the project. And so I think that'll be our next phase, is to go forward with the study and have the traffic engineers say, you can only have so much parking and so much building, and that's what we're going to have to design around with those parameters. And so I think that will be the next thing we do. As far as the water and the sewer, we did get will serve letters already, and the water was premised on the fact that there might be additional costs for infrastructure improvements to the water system, and so they're prepared to serve. In the sewer, there was existing credits from the bowling alley that we were given quite a few allocations of sewer from the sewer company for the sewer will serve letter. And the architecture, I think you guys have, is kind of the same as last time. We're still aiming towards that the barn-like agricultural type of structure. But this document just surfaced from 2001, And there's a lot of great information in here, and I just got this, and John, you were on the committee. You were part of this, and so we'll be looking at the design based on these guidelines, which we just received, and coming back to you with some of these ideas. But I guess I would like to know your feedback, whether or not you think our barn-like structure meets within the Western style guidelines that's spelled out in these guidelines. I think I covered most everything. I think we're still planning on being a very green project, and even like a net zero energy project. I think with the new roof lines that we have here, we have a really good opportunity to have fill up the roofs with solar panels and have a very green, environmentally friendly project. And the water conservation issues that we have talked about in our previous concepts, we're still planning on implementing the groundwater, what do you call it? Regeneration. Thank you. And then the future hotel. My clients still would like to, have that part of the program, and I understand that there is there's no vehicle to get to assure that they could do that in the future, and so we're kind of stumped right now as how do we propose that? So we're looking for your feedback on how we might be able to propose that for the future. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to have public comments before we really go into the concept review, but does anybody have any questions for Mark right off the bat? Mr. Quilisi.
Thank you. Sir?
Mark, could you come back up here?
A couple of things. First of all, the staff report says that the proposed water demand is less than for the bowling alley. And I'm kind of stumped by that. I think your dining area is certainly larger than anything that ever existed at the bowling alley. Plus you have a brewing operation and a pool. And so I'm unable to understand how the water demand would be less than it was for the bowling alley.
Did I say that? Sounds good, yeah.
Newer construction, newer standards.
Well, yeah, but there would be a more intense water use. I do agree that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second, on this monument sign business, originally you had this grain silo, so-called, out by the street. Now it's set back into the property.
With no sign, right, yeah.
With no signage.
Right.
Is that just to be a landmark of sorts, or you don't propose to put any signage on it or use it for any storage purpose? It's
a functional
feature of the architecture.
Well, it's also functional. It can actually act as the grain silo for the brewery, and that's where they store the grain.
Oh, so you might use it for storage.
Oh, it will be used. It will be a functional grain silo.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a water tower.
Yeah, no.
That's
my
what it
sketch
looks like.
that. It'll be, probably bulkier than what I'm sketching in there. Yeah.
Okay. Any other, Chester?
Yeah, Mark, I just got this report. This was an amazing thing
was
to
an
just
amazing
turn
document.
up somewhere. I think Randy kicked it out to everyone. Thank you, Randy.
Lost treasure.
And that was the first thing I did. I ripped this open and, looked at your plan, and I was surprised to find that your general idea pretty much complies with just about every item in here. You're going to find that out too. The parking in the rear, street front presence, Western style, architecturally pleasing. I mean, it really pushes a lot of the buttons that they've recommended here. So I think you'll have a pleasant read when you see this.
Quite a few of my projects in there too.
Yeah, right. I noticed that as well. So I just wanted to say that I think it's going to be this is a great guideline.
Yeah.
Whoever you put a lot of work into this.
There's a lot of work
this
went
is-
into that, yeah.
This is if you having this.
Yeah,
will
right.
give you just about everything you'll need
Yes.
to go forward. But I think you're already there.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Oh, thank you.
So, Commissioner Knoll.
I have some questions. So presently, I know you've got the pool and you've got the sports room,
Right.
what have you. is that going to be open to the public, or is it just for people that are coming to the restaurant and the brewery? Like, who gets to use it? Who are the users?
I'm not going to be the operator of the business,
Right.
but it'll be, for general public use
It is.
most of the time, but then it'll be for, private functions, meetings, that kind of thing at other times.
Okay. I have just a few more questions, and first of all, I just comments too. I'm fine with the architecture, love the green, sustainable methods and materials. It sounds like the sign height just got handled. It's not going to be up on the grain silo. And it was hard to tell from the drawing, but I know last time we had some comments and discussion about the interface of pedestrians and say bike riders being able to access the outdoor dining in the restaurant. Can they just walk in, or do they have to go through the parking lot to get to the kitchen and everything?
Yeah, we're hoping to bring them by like a central, waitress or, a hostess station. So the bikes we're showing the bikes being parked more towards the entryway, but I hear that maybe the bikes need to be out in front to be more of a feature, so people can see that as a bike-friendly facility. And so we'll work on that in the next go-around.
So in other words, they don't have to go through the driveway. They can actually access it from the sidewalk into that outdoor dining area?
No.
Oh, no, they are.
Well, our intention would be to have them go around and through like a hostess.
But through, like, let's just say I'm walking down the street, I'm on a bike, and I want to come into your facility.
Right.
Where would I enter, walking or on a bike, to come into that?
Yeah, we didn't get the presentation on the screen.
I think you'd have to, what you're saying though, Mark, is you'd come into the parking lot and go through the reception area where it says outdoor reception.
Can I point on this?
You can't really, but
Our intention would be, there's like a trellis walkway that would bring you to the restaurant. So
Right.
there's a sidewalk here, this is the pedestrian entrance.
Okay, so there's a separate, actually, pedestrian access, not that you'd have to walk through the parking lot. That's kind of what I was looking for, and I know last time we had the big discussion about, it'd be nice to open it up and from the street and not have to go with the cars if you were walking or biking, so, okay, good. Yeah, it was just hard to tell from the drawing, and, but thanks, that clarified that. And it looks like it has more of a face to the street, which, thank you. And then the other question is, I know you're, have it on here, future hotel. Looks like there's not much we can do about that right now, but, so what would the lawn areas be used for?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, we really like to secure the hotel idea some kind in some way. I'm not sure what that vehicle would be without getting the entitlements now. I mean, maybe you can give me some feedback on that, but we might have to go forward with the entitlements of the hotel currently and have it built out in the future.
Okay, so what you're thinking then maybe is that the hotel would actually be a part of this project?
Yes.
Okay, you're still trying to determine that?
Yeah, the owners are
Okay, it's
still.
up in the air still?
Yeah, still up in
Okay.
there, yeah.
We can't very well approve or disapprove.
I understand that.
Right, yeah.
Without the idea there of the
Right.
hotel.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Another
I'm
question?
sorry, I did have one more question, and I'm not sure, this may be for staff, for Jay Higgins. But as I look at this, and I recognize that this drawing, and by the way, I like the way you've moved things around on the property. I think it'll work much better for the city. But I can't tell from looking at this whether the setbacks along Ojai Avenue and along Golden West meet the city's requirements. In particular, the outdoor dining right along Ojai Avenue. I'm not sure what the rules are there, but it looks like you've got a small hedge, and then you've got tables. And recognizing that places like Azu are putting dining facilities on the sidewalk. And so I'm not saying I'm opposed to anything that you're doing. I'm just trying to understand the legality of what's proposed here.
Chairman Merck and Commissioner Quilisi, the setbacks in the C1 zone district in the front are 10 feet. So hard to tell from what's on the plans, but could easily be within the, outside of the setback, unless, you know, your question relates to 0 setback or less than 10. I guess I'm not sure what your question is.
Yeah, well, as I look at the drawing, I can't tell how much setback there is from Ojai Avenue to dining facility or from Golden West to dining facility and kitchen.
One point to bear in mind is that the setback is tested against the building, not necessarily the outdoor dining area itself.
Great.
But there is also
that clarifies a lot. Thank you.
And there's a 3-foot wall there that's 3 feet, and I will trust that that's actually 3 feet. At least that's what it looks like on my copy. 3-foot walls are also allowed within these front setbacks. And so that too wouldn't have to be set back to 10 feet. But what I agree with Mr. Higgins, I can't tell from this plan how wide that hedgerow is. So that's perhaps a question for Mr. Whitman. Oh, and while I have the microphone, to answer the prior question, it is possible to get the whole thing entitled now. In other words, it's possible for the commission to consider in the council, or the commission to approve in the council if appealed, both the proposed meeting room brew pub and the hotel, but not have the hotel built right away. The vehicle to do it would be a phasing approval. The planning commission has the power to approve a phased project. We'd want to carefully think through the conditions, the stipulations, the protections for the city should something change in the future. But at a base level, it's possible to do it now. Certainly, I think this is the first time Mr. Whitman's hearing this, so I expect staff will work with the applicant to flesh that set of issues out, but it's certainly possible.
Okay. Bobby?
I have a question regarding the fence. Is Golden West considered to be the front face or Ojai Avenue? And if it's Ojai Avenue, is the 6-foot high fence allowable?
Yeah, there's 2 different size walls there.
Ojai Avenue would be the principal street frontage, and the whatever, and again, this is just conceptual, but whatever fences would not only have to be consistent with the zoning ordinance, but also with the design guidelines.
Yeah. Thank you.
So then is the 6-foot not allowable?
6 foot probably would not be allowed in the setback.
3-foot wall by the dining is okay, 6-foot wall by the pool is not, sounds like.
But
Okay.
there does need to be some sort of a enclosure for the pool.
There would have to be, yes.
On the pool, the key there is the state building code does require a pool wall or a cover. I don't think they want to put a cover on a commercial pool, so it'd be a wall. So there might be some wiggle room between where the wall is structured, given the front setback requirements and the requirement for a pool wall. And I think the wall,
5 feet?
if I recall, it's 5 feet, not 6, so that might be a way to do it. Perhaps a variance
says
for the
6 on
minimum 2 feet. It's listed as 6 here, but we could require it to be dropped down to 5 and then produce perhaps a variance for the remaining 2 feet between the 3 and the 5. Would be one vehicle. Not saying that has to be the only vehicle.
Let's try to stay away from that.
That's the commission's choice.
Ray, you have questions for the applicant?
Question for Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I get you're not the operator, but in terms of the meeting room, which someone said a sports room, I'm a little confused on what that's going to be used for. Now, it seems like if it's a special function and someone rents it out for a wedding, that's what would be in there, and of course it would spill out into the dining and the lawn area and back and whatnot. But is that meeting room going to now have a climbing wall in it? I mean, what's that space used for? I mean, how are you going to have a wedding if there's a climbing wall?
Yeah,
Right?
good question. I'm not sure about the climbing wall, but I think that the intention is to be pool, ping pong, games in there, for, during, the normal business operations. And then when there's a meeting or a wedding or something like that, that would be cleared out and new, furniture or whatever would be brought in.
Okay, well, it's a little hard to move a pool table, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, right, okay.
Unless it was on wheels, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. How tall, do you know how tall that building is, the meeting room? Like, what's the height, the ceiling height?
I didn't have my sketch there. Yeah, it would be about 20 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Um,
Thanks.
Yes, Ms. Nolan.
Mark, one last comment. This is about the access from the street into the outdoor dining in the restaurant area. And just something for you to consider. I still really like the connection from the sidewalk into that space. I know you're showing a sidewalk right now off adjacent to the driveway.
Right.
And it's kind of lost to the street.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you could consider having an opening between the pool fencing and then in the outdoor dining kitchen area.
Yeah.
It seems more welcoming from the street.
Yeah.
It's kind of a viewport into the space too. It's
Possible, yeah, we could get our reception, adjust our reception area.
just a consideration, yeah.
Sure.
It's a little more on the lines of what we discussed at your last presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Thank you. I'd like to we have 2 speakers cards here, and I'd like to get some public input before then we can have an actual concept review. So Cindy Swallows.
Hi, I'm Cindy Swallows, and my house backs right up to this project. I'm sorry, but this is the first I've seen of this, so I got nothing but the letter from you, so I have no idea what this all looks like, so I was sitting here kind of lost. I guess my main thing is it still seems like so much being crammed onto this spot. And I don't think they quite understand. They're just putting up things, in my impression, like this building. He's not sure what's going to go inside, a climbing wall, a pool table, place for weddings, place for meetings. I've got a big concern about that. I just feel like things have to be put up, that just, he has to fill all the space, and I don't quite get that for some reason. And the swimming pool, is the swimming pool is that public also? Is there going to be a lifeguard at the pool? What are the pool hours going to be? What are the restaurant hours going to be? I still haven't got an answer to that. The closing time on the weekends. Alcohol license, will there be an alcohol license? I still haven't got an answer to that. 4 storage containers got added on that weren't on there either. Now, that's something else that's been added onto the property. So where did those come from all of a sudden? Why are those needed when they weren't needed before?
They were there before.
They were?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Okay, and that's my fault. I'm sorry about that.
They're for storing materials for the brewing.
I got that after, but I was like, I didn't see them, I guess, before. And here's another question. How come they haven't started any cleanup on this property? It's been, I know you're going through the permits to get everything done and everything like that. Has the permits been applied for to start cleaning? To start knocking down the building, to start?
Part of this process is to demolish the building that's there.
Right.
But we haven't issued any permits for that yet.
Yeah. Do they have to have permits to do that?
They will eventually, yeah.
Okay, so I just thought that would be something that you could start doing, applying for the permits and start getting busy on it. And then also, I know that when they do knock down that building, there's going to be all kinds of critters coming out. Because it's been there a long time.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there would be like an extermination that goes in there beforehand to take care of anything like that, to keep it from coming into my yard. So, house, thank you. I guess that's it. But my biggest concern is, like I said, I haven't had a chance to look at this new concept. Is this the back area? What is?
It just says lawn on there.
We're calling it
That's
future hotel.
The future hotel. Okay,
Yeah.
so okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy.
The future hotel.
Okay, and I also have a speaker's card from Vivian Chanelli. Do we have any extra copies of this plan that we could give Cindy?
I have a tiny little copy.
Again, my name is Vivian Chinelli. Good evening, everybody. I live right next door to the bowling alley lot. Just to show you, here's my beautiful chair that I sit in at night, the fire going, and the bowling alley lot.
Can you make sure you're captured by the microphone?
I'm sorry, and the bowling alley lot is right here. So I'm really very concerned mainly about noise. So I'm happy that there have been studies made. Before I get into the noise, though, I just do want to say, I want to echo Cindy's concern about the critters there, because there's definitely a family of raccoons living in one of the palm trees right next to it. So it's nice. I also, it's funny, when I look at this drawing here, I live right next to it. The property just doesn't look as deep as it looks when you look at it here. I too wonder how all of this is going to fit in there, because here it looks like the property is so immense and expansive, but it really isn't. So my main concern, of course, is the area. Right now, my main concern is the area that's right by my home. So I live where it says conceptual street elevation. That's my house right up there. And that last time I got one of these is a green area. And I remember somebody saying that would be a party area, although now I hear you're not sure what they would use it for. But if it's a party area, I'm projecting on Saturdays and Sundays, I'll be sharing an area with maybe a lot of screaming little children, and I love children because I taught kindergarten. But, a lot of children, a lot of people coming from the brewery. Somebody just brought up weddings. I don't know if you brought it up, but possible weddings there. That whole area for me every weekend is just going to be loud, I'm guessing. And my nice little Ojai, kind of yard retreat for myself will definitely undergo a big change. So when you say you're not sure what they're going to allow there, that scares me because I don't know what to expect at this point. So that was one of my concerns. A wall, I don't know if there's a proposed wall, and if a wall indeed can mitigate the kind of noise that might take place on weekends with parties happening, children's birthday parties, that kind of thing. I think last time we brought up, didn't we, Charlie, lights? Right? If it's going to be a party area for the wedding after the ceremony and everyone goes out there, you're going to need a lot of lighting. So that's another concern. So that's pretty much all I would like to say about that area. I would love, if we could kind of flush out what is going to be allowed there until what time. When would things be required to kind of close up? And the other thing I just heard today was, Mark, you changed, I guess it's a change of delivery route. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the delivery was happening somewhere off of Ojai on the kind of the left of the restaurant. If you're facing the rest, if you're facing.
That was the original plan.
The original plan.
And now it's coming off of Golden West.
So now it's coming off of Golden West. So I know friends who live near restaurants with deliveries, and you're hearing a lot of beep, 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 backing up trucks off of this residential area here. So I'm guessing that the trucks hopefully would, if they did come through there, would come off of Ojai and not take maybe, Grand and come down Grand to go into this. I'm guessing this is where they would turn that opening that exists there. So that's just a few bushes from my house. So do trucks deliver Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Friday night? What days? And again, when they're backing up backwards, they're beep, beep, beeping. And so these are just a lot of concerns, all related to noise. I mean, I hope you all feel the same way, and no one wants their homes kind of bombarded with, again, this is why we love Ojai, because it's nice and quiet, especially in that area. It's such a beautiful area over there. The other thing was the pool. I also am just kind of curious, and then this relates to my concern about traffic. So is it open to the public? I know you're not sure. You said you weren't, it could be, you said it would be sometimes open to the public, but maybe not. So I see public from Ojai coming down Golden West, parking on the side street there to go into the pool. Now there's going to be an opening there where the trucks deliver. So maybe that would be an easy route for people just to avoid Ojai Boulevard and come down on Golden West. So I see traffic there. I see a wedding party with maybe 100 people. Where are they going to be parking if it's a nice size wedding? I think those are my concerns. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Janelli.
Thank you.
I just have one thing.
Oh, can you come up to the microphone? Come on up. You can be part of our public comment. Can you tell us your name and where you live and so on?
I'm Charlie Simmons, and I run the villa that's behind the, what is it? The old bowling alley. And I'm actually a little bit to the side, but I have a problem with the noise issue also, because I have elderly people there that are in their 90s and 80s, and they don't sleep well. And it's just, if there's a lot of noise, it's just going to be horrific. So that's my big concern, is the noise.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Would anyone else like to comment? You can certainly come up.
I'm very accident prone. I don't know what's happening.
It's these new chairs.
Yeah, the new. Oh, then I won't. Okay, a question? Can I ask a question?
I would suggest not making, stating a direct opinion on the project, as that opportunity will, I expect, come to you at a later date.
Okay, yeah.
Playing games again.
This is a question that I would probably ask anyway, that I want to, can a condition for a commercial project, not just this one, but any commercial project that's very close, as this one is, to a residential area, can a condition be that the residents close, at least the residents very close to the project, where if there's overflow parking needed, they would get what the people at the end of Aliso now have, that says parking for residents and their guests only? Can that be a condition for any of these kind of projects?
What you're describing is a residential preferential parking district, a permanent parking area for residents.
Yeah.
And that's within the city's power to do. It would best be structured separately, rather than a condition on this project.
Uh-huh.
It takes a slightly different approval process, which begins with a petition by the affected residences. So folks should communicate with the acting community development director on the application process for that. And more information can be made available. But it's certainly within the power of the city to do, and to move it forward, in part to mitigate the traffic and the parking impacts from the project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak on this? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it back to the Planning Commission.
Questions for Mark?
What's that?
I have more questions for Mark.
You have more questions for Mark? All right, Mark, we have more questions for you.
Well, it kind of sparked from the public comments. It says here that, and you mentioned as well, you hired an acoustical engineering firm, and there'll be noise mitigating features, that the noise can be sufficiently contained within the structure. So that's the building, the indoor meeting
Yes.
play area. So did that engineering firm look at the outside too, and how to mitigate the noise going into the back neighbors? Because you have two big lawn areas here. Lawns are meant to hang out on. There's no other reason to have a lawn there other than,
Well,
let's go hang out on a lawn.
yeah. Actually, the feedback the engineer gave us was it was going to be, really hard to, the noise ordinance is really strict here in Ojai. The 45 decibel level in residential areas is very strict. It's really quiet. It's conversation level. And so in order to, there is no way to have activities back there and meet the noise ordinance. And so that's the reason for the structure, is to bring the noise. He said, if you built a structure, there's all kinds of sound mitigation measures you can build within the structure to contain the noise. And,
Right.
and so he said that was really the only way to make.
So the back is I see there's trees back there, yes, or bushes in the back?
Yeah, there'd be like.
But no wall.
Well, no, we'd definitely be putting a wall up as well, yeah.
And do you know the height of that?
Well, I mean, the
Or what's
taller the
the
better, I think, as far as noise, but, that's to be discussed, yeah.
I think aren't you limited to 6 feet for a wall?
6 feet is standard, you don't need a permit for 6 feet in rural residential areas, but.
Plant a bunch of
But you
cypress
can go up
trees.
to, with a variance, you can go up to 10 or 12 feet if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah. The existing,
So-
existing bowling alley wall, I think is about 15 foot back there, the back wall of the bowling alley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sharon?
I'm sorry, it's just a little reminder that the Humane Society built a sound wall to buffer the sound from the dogs for the Whispering Oaks. And it was a special sound wall with special reports on it.
Thank you.
Special materials. Okay.
Yeah, there are, curvy and different.
Well, maybe some due diligence.
Buffering, yeah, that.
There needs to be done, because I understand that it's 45 decibels, but, that there's still, screaming kids out there playing ball or whatever who came out of the, and you don't want the neighbors having to keep calling, we want to it would need to be mitigated, so there's a happy balance there,
Yeah.
so. That's a whole research project on itself, on what kind of walls to build there to really dampen it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And we could temporarily, landscape that area so it's not being used for activities at all, really. And our intention is to bring the activities to the front of the property for that very reason. And so.
Yeah, I remember last time this came before us, I was questioning putting lawns in at all, even though you have permeable surfaces and other, water conservation features, which may offset having a lawn.
Right.
I was questioning having a lawn.
Right.
Okay. Questions, or should we just go around? I think we can do our concept review feedback for you, Mark. So just let's start with you.
Well, Mark, I think you made a lot of improvements on the property based on our last conversation, bringing everything to the front. I think you comply with the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines, which you're going to find out here shortly. I am a little bit, even though I'm very pro solar, I don't like the look of them aesthetically, so especially coming into Ojai in that direction. There are products out there, you might already know this. I don't know how successful they've been, but Solar Cities put out those solar shingles and solar roof shingles that you don't see them as solar panels. It's just a suggestion I throw out there, because it just aesthetically, it doesn't, solar panels don't look that great on top of roofs. And I think it's really important coming down into town in that direction that this sits there as the architectural piece that I know you have the ability to create. Other than that, I think you've answered all the questions that I had earlier. The lawn areas, I would recommend either removing them or applying for the phase permit, like Matt had suggested. That way we can approve the whole project as a whole, and then you can come back and do the hotel at a reasonable time. Is there a time on that phase?
I mean, the phasing would be as set by the commission, so you could set it as X years or
X amount of years.
Right, and we would want to think carefully about what that should look like and what the implications are the other one to think carefully about is what's the triggers and what would be required should X years hit and they don't build a hotel.
Right. Well, I think we can build that in, but I think more importantly, addressing some of the public comments, it'll give a complete vision of what they want to do on the property. I think that's really important. People really want to know what's going to happen in the room. So I would suggest to you, as it progresses, that you get a very clear picture of what's going to go on the property. And if the hotels are there, they're going to know what's going to be built there in the future. Everybody's going to have the opportunity to go through it. I think it'd be to your advantage because you'd gone through the process, and that's my suggestions.
Thank you, Chester. Commissioner Corbin?
Yeah, I also think, if you put your sleeping rooms in the back there, that might make the neighbors feel a little calmer about the noise. I would like to see, I guess, agree with Kathy, it's what we talked about the last time, a more welcoming entry for pedestrians and bikers. One issue that came up at the Planning Commissioners Conference this year a lot was that we worry so much about how many parking spaces there are going to be. And in a certain sense, we make it too easy for people to drive. And what we really want to do is to encourage them to use other means of transportation. And, when you go into a walled old city, you never drive through the city because you don't want to, it's not fun. And so we want to make it really easy for people to have places to park their car, for it to be welcoming to walk or to ride their bike there. I mean, it's so easy to ride your bike almost anywhere in town here. And it will be even easier when we have the complete streets policy. So it would be nice to see the bike parking area so that it's really obvious that that's an intention there, and might help mitigate some of the parking issue. And then the other thing is, I think I might have mentioned this the last time, is a project in Palm Springs. It's a hotel called Arrive, and from the main street, on one side there's a brew pub, and then there's a pool that anybody can use, and there's a hotel wrapping around, and then there's parking all around the back. And very much reminds me of this in certain senses.
I'll have to look into that one. Okay.
It's Corten steel, looks kind of like wood from far away and rusty up close.
Right.
But one of the nicest, and it's a great ice cream store, but one of the nicest things is that as you drive down the street, you can actually see through into where the pool area is, and it makes you want to go there, and it's nice. It's very inviting for the community. We walked up there the first time, and it's a coffee shop, the ice cream place on the street, so it's like welcoming to the public, and they said, oh, anybody can come and swim here. We went, oh, okay. Yeah, it's nice, but it's nice. You might want to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's the intention here as well. It's like it would be open to the public, or anyone could come swim. Their incentive is that you'd want to spend the day there and drink beer and order food, and so that's their incentive. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Quillisi?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions for Matt, I think, and one potentially for city staff, Mr. Summers. You mentioned the back wall. The existing back wall is very tall, 15 feet, I think you said.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, would you consider just leaving it where it is? Does that have something to?
There's no wall.
The back wall of the bowling alley.
The existing building.
Oh, the back wall of the building. Okay. Because I didn't see one on the plan. All right. Okay.
But we would be proposing a wall along the property line.
All right. My second question would have to do with parking, since we had some discussion in the administrative report that there might not be enough parking now. If you decide to apply in a phased project for hotel space on those two long rectangles that are now shown as lawn. Is the parking that you have proposed appropriate currently to the restaurant and the brewery and maybe the meeting room? And how will that change if you want to put 50 or 60 rooms in there? I'm not sure how you're going to be able to handle the parking needs of that as well. So it's just something to think about. All of that said, I really like the design. I think you made a lot of improvements from the last time you were here to talk to us, and I think it'd be a great project if we could bring it in. I do have one question. I guess it's for Mr. Summers. The nearly at the end of the staff report under design review findings, it says that the one of the findings by the Planning Commission needs to be, and I'll summarize, that no adverse effect of any type on surrounding property will result. That comes from the Ojai Municipal Code 10-2.2009B. And depending on what the definition of adverse effect of any type is, this could conceivably prohibit any development anywhere in the city that abuts any other property. And so I'm trying to get, as you mentioned before, a reasonableness test here. I don't want these people to go on spending money if they're going to run up against a brick wall. But I don't think it's really a brick wall, and I think we need some guidance on that. Thank you.
Certainly. The finding is tested not as no adverse, the phrase no adverse effect of any type on surrounding property is tested against the other findings in the code, which speak to basic compliance with zoning regulations, avoidance of traffic congestion as tested by CEQA, compliance with the lighting ordinance, compliance of the dark sky ordinance, compliance with the
the noise
ordinance, et cetera. In other words, it's not tested at no impact ever, because you're completely correct. No impact ever would block all development, and that would not survive challenge. It's tested against is an impact that would be adverse, greater or lesser than the standard set elsewhere in the code for that type of impact.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nolan.
Thank you, Commissioner Merck, Chair Merck. A lot of my fellow commissioners have reflected some of the thoughts that I had, but I think my big concerns are, well, first of all, if you're going to do a hotel or not, and would it be a second-story hotel, or how many rooms were you thinking? That was a question I had.
Well,
or ballpark.
Right now, it'd be like 30. 30. But yeah, parking, like I said before, the parking study would be the next,
right.
Thing that we would go to and have him analyze the hotel along with everything else and tell us, hey, you got to scale, this project back or whatever we have to do to make it work.
Yeah, and I realize you're at this conceptual stage. You're wanting more feedback, but I'd highly encourage that welcoming access from the street. And it sounds like, of course, you're going to, do the traffic study, look at the parking if you decided you're going to do the hotel, and then, of course, again, the sound and light. And I know we have the ordinances, but to really be aware and respectful of the neighbors behind you.
Yeah.
Sounds like the hotel may be the best solution because you can do a wall, you could do a plant buffer, and then have the hotel, which I know can be soundproof pretty much.
Right.
So you'd have that nice block and. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I like the architecture, but I think when you come back after you do all these studies, it's going to dictate more of like, okay, we can only do this or we can only do that.
Yeah, one of our strategies on is that to utilize some of the vacant parking lots and lots nearby in the neighborhood for overflow event, special event kind of parking demand, so there wouldn't be. People parking down the street in Golden West. And
right. I think what legally you have to go, maybe Mr. Sommers could address this, but I think there's some sort of a legal agreement that you make with an adjacent property owner.
Right. The city has in the past allowed property owners to offset some of their parking demand, particularly for special events, through some sort of proved up agreement between your property owner and another property owner that has parking. And then it's both an agreement and it passes muster in that area you're proposing to use for overflow parking will actually be available. Classic example is the church. Church parking lots generally aren't used much during the week, but they're always used on the day of worship. So if you propose to use that parking as offset parking on the other days, it could work. You may need weekend parking, so church might not work, but the concept is there. It's certainly doable, and it can be built in through conditions of approval.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Commissioner Merck. I have a few things to talk about. Mark, everything you design is golden, so I always love your designs
Thank you very much.
and your flexibility in changing them around.
Thank you.
I do want to speak about water. I applaud that you have mandatory stormwater improvements happening, impermeable surfaces, and some gray water use. Honestly, I would like to see it go a step further in terms of possible water reuse and recycling and filtration. Last time this project came up for review, I spoke about wanting to see some hard data regarding the amount of water it takes to brew beer. I did my own research, in terms, depending on the type of brewery, on the low end, it was 4 liters of water to 1 liter of beer. So I really want to see some offset. We are in a drought. I know the groundwater basin got filled up quite a bit, but that, our water situation is still critical. And I'm not the engineer to collect that data, but I know there's a way to figure out the offsets between what you can recycle, reuse, reintroduce back into the property to offset the water use for brewing beer. It's highly, highly, highly intensive. I'm not one to take someone's individual rights away in terms of, here's the business a person wants to create. But we need to speak, we need to look at it communally as well in terms of the water use, because the water belongs to everyone. So I still really want to see those numbers. It's challenging, this balance between the privacy and well-being of the neighbors that abut this project, butt up against this project, and then, creating such a beautiful place for visitors and the public to use. Guys, it's almost like we won't know till it's built, and hopefully it'll be built in a way that won't infringe on anyone's, well-being in their homes. It's almost like we won't know till after the fact, or visiting sites in other areas that have had similar conditions and seen what they built, and doing some research in that area.
Right. Some
Thanks
case
for better-
studies, you're saying? Maybe present some case studies?
Some case studies, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the Humane Society was one. I wanted to address the pedestrian walkthrough too off Ojai Avenue.
Yeah.
I go to Papa Lenin's a lot. I love the family and I love the food and I love that patio. I don't always want to go through the front door, and I walk through the patio off the street. So I'm wondering if you could do a pedestrian walkway that goes into the outdoor dining area.
Yeah.
And then into the restaurant.
I think that's, yeah, I mean, that's the only solution, or for this design anyway, without repuzzling.
Yeah, no,
things
and
up.
I'm not suggesting repuzzling, I'm just suggesting putting an opening, or like Commissioner Quillisi just said, between the pool area and the outdoor
Yeah.
dining, or something that's
Yeah.
where that 3-foot wall opens up and people can walk in off
Yeah,
the sidewalk.
Yeah, I understand. we don't want to have everyone go around to that entry, so there just needs to be 2 entries, I think, is what has to happen, so.
South Fork Range.
There you go.
In the staff report, there was a paragraph that was interesting to me. And let me find this, I marked it. You know, as many people have heard over the months here, I like to look at everything connected in systems, so you know, the tourist traffic, new businesses, affordable housing, complete streets, you know, they're not in their own, we need to speak about them individually, and they're all connected. They're all a matrix, they all have an effect on each other. And in the staff report, I thought it was on the second page.
Yeah, I commented on how comprehensive that staff report was.
I'm going to find it. The subject property is noted as having a special housing overlay designation in the city's housing element. This designation recognizes the property as being underdeveloped or underutilized and currently blighted, and as being an opportunity to provide for affordable housing, something would not ordinarily be allowed on a property zoned for commercial uses. The property is not required to be developed with residential units, but if it were, densities would range from 15 to 20 dwelling units per acre. The only reason I brought that up, because one, I thought it was interesting that it was in here, and two, thinking outside of the box at other possibilities. And I know a future hotel is what's being suggested. What if there was living quarters on site for the people that worked there? Instead of a turnkey hotel, some housing was provided, like the inn was going to do at one time over in the Ford lot. I think they were going to build some affordable housing. They never followed through. What if...
They still owe us that housing.
What's that?
They still owe us that housing.
Okay.
I think that, yeah.
So, I just like to look at possibilities.
Yeah.
So what if the possibility was, instead of a hotel, using it as a residential facility for the people that lived there, if that was legal to have that kind of mixed use there? And I know that it would decrease income, but at the same time, it would provide the state mandate for some affordable housing too for the workers that work there.
Interesting idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Powers. So, Mark, I'm going to conclude things here. I'm actually really excited that there's a possibility of actually developing something on this site. The entire time, actually, my family went to the bowling alley when we first moved here.
It was fun, yeah.
It's been abandoned almost the entire time I've lived in Ojai, so this would be very exciting. I think this plan goes a long ways toward addressing all the concerns we had originally. I do think it's really disingenuous to show a future hotel on there. I don't think there's any way you can build that hotel if you do the brewery.
Right.
Because I think the parking is going to be the really controlling factor. And it's actually looks, even with 60 parking spaces, it still looks like it's a little underparked right now for the uses that you're proposing, but there's plenty of room to expand that, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. My suggestion for the lawn would be that you make that a drought-tolerant landscape, which would take away the possibility of people having parties there and that sort of things, and it would also improve the water use, so
Right.
I think that would be fantastic. I really like the traffic circulation. I like the solution you came up with of trucks turning off of Golden West. I mean, they only have to go down couple hundred feet on Golden West and they turn
yeah,
in.
the ordinance is 125 feet from the intersection.
Yeah.
So that's exactly where we're at.
It's a much better solution than we had before, and it separates the customer circulation from the commercial stuff, so I think that's a much better solution. I really like that. I like the style. I like the proposal you have for the elevation with that whole western style. We really don't see enough of that on Ojai Avenue. It'd be really kind of cool to have that in there. I don't know, it may not be obvious to the public, but I like the sound mitigation measures that you put in here already. You've got these soundproof doors on the edge of the meeting room. The meeting room itself is going to block sound from the pool.
Right.
You know, it's a fairly massive building in there. So I'm really pleased with what you've done with that so far. And that wall that you have around the delivery area looks really good too in terms of sound and so on. Oh, and if we do another submittal on this, it would be great to show the existing building on there, just to kind of orient people. Just kind of the outline of the building, so people can go, oh, okay, there's where the bowling alley is now, and here's it's kind of hard, just looking at this now to tell where everything is.
It takes about the back third of the lot, the existing building only,
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it, but I think for a lot of people, they haven't ever really looked at it down from above like this. And that is about it on my...
Chair, before you turn to the next item, one further comment. Thank you.
Okay. The city attorney has some comments as well.
Make sure all are aware, particularly as we have some members of the public who may not be familiar with the process. Going forward, among completing the studies that have been discussed and assessing the questions raised by the public and the commission, I expect that this project will also be put through a full CEQA review, probably including an outside consultant completing that CEQA review at the applicant's cost. I don't know yet if this is going to be an M&D or an EIR. That's unclear. It'll depend on the impacts, it'll depend on the analysis. But I wanted to make sure folks are aware that this is probably not going to be able to be processed as an exemption, and probably is going to be looking at an M&D or EIR, which are, in English, mitigated negative declaration or environmental impact report. The difference between the two is a mitigated negative declaration assesses the impacts of a project and finds that with mitigation measures as specified, the impacts are less than significant. An EIR concludes that assesses the impacts again and also assesses alternatives to the proposed project, one of which must be the no project alternative, doing nothing, and then concludes again whether the impacts are less than significant or else are one of the more which is not less than significant, and that goes to a statement of overriding considerations. So that's kind of the process we're looking at, much more involved on CEQA perspective than is typically seen for the more typical projects. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, just for the public's information, this is not the final plan. This is just a concept plan at this point. So Mark's going to come back to us with another updated plan, which at some point, you could do another concept review if you wanted to, which would be great. But at some point, we're going to actually vote on, do we want to do this or not? But we don't do that tonight. We're just offering feedback. So, thank you.
We might come back with a hotel idea.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for your input as well. And we look forward to seeing something resolved on this site. So we're going to move on to item 4, which was passed over earlier. Item 4 is the sign ordinance. TA 1701, revising Article 16 of Title 10, Chapter 2 of the Ojai Municipal Code. See, aren't you glad you're missing all this? Governing sign standards and amending Section 10-2.3602, Subdivision 5 and 6 of the OMC defining sign. The proposed ordinance is exempt from review under the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15061N3 of the CEQA guidelines, as the changes to sign standards lack the potential to cause a significant effect on the environment. The proposed ordinance is also not a project subject to CEQA because it will not cause a direct or reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment, as it updates sign standards without permitting new or increased development. So could we hear from staff on this, please?
Sure. I'll provide the staff report on this one as I drafted the proposed changes. Brief background. I won't read every word. The sign ordinance revisions that are before you for discussion stemmed from a June 2015 decision of the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, that was a sea change in sign ordinance regulation at the local level. It was a rather unexpected decision, and it was authored by Justice Thomas, although there were some fractured concurrences. The heart of the decision was that any sign ordinance regulation that is content-based, which was read to mean If it requires reading the sign to determine what rules are, then it's content-based and thus presumptively invalid and subject to strict scrutiny. Few sign regulations survive strict scrutiny as opposed to rational basis review. The strict scrutiny review asks, is there a compelling government interest at issue, and is the proposed regulation narrowly tailored to fulfill that compelling interest? Versus rational basis asks, is there a reasonable government interest at issue, and is there a rational basis for that regulation? It's a fairly deferential standard that most everything passes. Strict scrutiny, most everything fails. Strict scrutiny is also applied, typically in the First Amendment context, and is also applied for regulations that implicate a protected class, so a race or religion or things like that. So it's a heavy bar to meet. And the court had previously looked at sign ordinances with a more reasonable eye, or a more common sense eye, in assessing, well, it's reasonable to have different rules for traffic signs versus city signs versus business signs versus residential signs. Those were all thrown out with this case. So, but all hope is not lost. The concurrence by Justice Kagan, if I remember correctly, did speak to keeping in place some common sense distinctions. For example, traffic signs. A stop sign can continue to be required to be octagonal and red and say the word stop, even though you have to read it to apply those rules, because that's what fulfills the government interest of ensuring traffic safety. So once the case came down, we were looking at it, we brought it to the city council with a proposed initial discussion. The council directed preparation of a term sheet that would be for the amendments to the ordinance. We brought that to the city council in October of last year, and the council directed preparation of this proposed ordinance, which is two basic goals. First goal is meet the requirements of Reed versus Town of Gilbert as we best assess them, and in particular meet them with an eye towards maintaining as much of the existing substantive requirements in the sign code as possible. For example, right now there are special rules for real estate signs that are referring to a property as open or available for sale, and that type of requirement requires reading the sign, and thus would be probably invalid under Reed versus Town of Gilbert. However, if we set up a rule for signs on any property that is for sale, it's not just limiting in with special size and allowance. It doesn't require that the sign state that the property is for sale. We can let the market fulfill that requirement. We can let the market impose the reality that most people who have a property for sale will want to put a sign that says for sale, even though we're not requiring that the sign say for sale. It's a bit of it's a nuanced distinction, but it should help it survive. And in a couple of district court decisions, that has worked. None of these cases have yet hit the Supreme Court again, or the Ninth Circuit, or for that matter, the state Supreme Court, testing post-Reed versus Town of Gilbert ordinances. And then the second piece of the revisions that are before you today is intended to simplify the sign ordinance and make it a little more user-friendly, make it a little more intelligible to the council, the commission, staff, everyone who's working with these issues, and the public as well, who are trying to figure out, what can I have? I've got it in a business, what are my sign rules? This is trying to make it a little more user-friendly and understandable for folks who are looking at what kind of signs they're allowed to have or would like to have. What we have in terms of process tonight is step one, discussion. We propose at least two meetings on this because it's comprehensive. It's a fair amount of text we're throwing at you. Tonight's discussion, we'd like feedback from Mr. Haney and any other members of the public who may arrive, and feedback from the commission, and we'll make changes. I already have some comments by email, and we'll make those changes as well. And then any other changes you would like, we'll bring them back to the next meeting on June 21st. And then at that meeting, if you're ready, it'll be a public hearing. I expect we'll get some more public comment. And at that meeting, if you're ready, you can adopt the resolution in the packet to recommend it to the council. And then the council will look at it at a meeting as scheduled by the mayor. But of course, that schedule is recommended. cannot take action tonight because tonight's not a public hearing, but you could hear it after more than one meeting if you wished, not just the 21st. And then to speak a little bit about what's before you, if we turn to attachment C, which kind of thinking about what we've changed, the purpose is largely the same, but we have added in particular, the new paragraph E, the larger one, that speaks to Reed versus Town of Gilbert and speaks to the idea that the goal here is not to favor commercial or non-commercial speech and to be content neutral in the regulations, but still preserve small town aesthetic character, the city's historic character, and reduce the visual clutter and reduce adverse impacts to pedestrian and traffic safety that might derive from unfortunate signs. Section 1602 applicability is an amalgam of the two previous sections that were 1602 and 1604. 1602 in the present code is applicability. 1604 speaks to the approval authority. We put that together into one section to make it a little more clear who when a permit is required and who approves the permits. And then 1603 is the general provisions for all the signs. This is largely the same substantively as is true now and is currently that's in 1604. We move violations to the enforcement section. And it also builds in some provisions of the current 1606, which speaks to findings. Again, trying to make it more user-friendly. And that's largely the same in terms of size and height and area measurement, etc. Let's see, 1604 landmarks is the same largely as the existing 1605, which speaks to landmarks, with one difference that's worth discussing or pointing out directly. At present, the Section 1605 requires the Historic Preservation Commission to approve or deny sign permits for all signs for landmarks, but it's silent as to the process for that. We've added a couple of sentences here in this proposed subsection 2 of 1604 that would provide that the Historic Preservation Commission's approval would be at a public hearing, would be on an application for a sign permit, perhaps a historic sign permit, not the same as a full work permit application. That the staff would, if approved by, recommended by you and approved by the council, staff could put that together, but it would, I expect, to be a less intensive application than a full work permit application, reflecting the fact that a sign, while important and aesthetically critical, isn't the same thing as a proposed full-scale change to a landmark building, and thus could be approved with a smaller, less intensive application, thus reducing the cost for applicants and reducing the burden on landmark owners, thus encouraging landmarks to be more properties to become landmarked. The prohibited signs is 1605. That's the same, largely, again, as the existing prohibited signs in 1607. The 1608 is exemptions, 1606 is exemptions, again, largely the same as the existing 1608 exemptions, with one or two changes that are worth pointing out. We have proposed in subsection K of 1606 to straight up exempt political signs. This is one area that the court focused on in Reed versus Town of Gilbert, and as the commission may be aware, and certainly the council is, in the last election in November 16, I advised publicly that the existing sign codes requirements for a permit for a political sign are unenforceable, and the city did not enforce those. That will not survive review. So we have not enforced it, thus there's no basis for a challenge any potential plaintiff's lawyers. It's already been declared unenforceable by the city, no challenge there. What did remain enforced in this last election was the height and size requirements on political signs. My recommendation is that we strip those two, because those were different than for other signs, which required reading the sign to assess what the rules are, and a political sign is core First Amendment speech. It's voting and running for office are fundamental First Amendment activities. fundamental protected activities, I haven't seen a basis to justify those rules. So the recommendation is to add an exemption for political signs. And thus, there's no argument that we're trying to apply rules to them that are different than rules for other signs. However, it's worth pointing out that we do propose maintaining the existing requirement that signs in the public right-of-way are prohibited unless approved by the city by an encroachment permit. Thus, it would remain in place the ban on political signs in the right-of-way that exists now, as along with all other signs. Any sign in the right-of-way is prohibited unless approved by an encroachment permit. That would remain the same going forward. It just wouldn't be called out as a separate ban on political signs that is vulnerable. For looking ahead, we've got 1607. It's the standards for specific sign types. And that is, again, largely the same as the existing section providing specific standards for sign types in 1609. One thing to point out there is that pretty much throughout that long section, there were definitions repeated between 1609 and 10-3602, the definition section at the back. And there were some places where it was said 6 here and half dozen there, and others 6 there, half dozen there. We deleted the definitions from 1609 and copied them into 3602, the definition section at the back of the zoning code, and then harmonized or recommended harmonization where those definitions varied, thus helping to solve ambiguity that exists in the code now and to make it a little clearer that the terms aren't defined twice in 2 different ways. Let's see. And then we're looking ahead to 1608 sign program. And this is largely, again, the same as we have now in 1610 for comprehensive sign programs. In fact, it's almost entirely the same. We've adjusted it slightly to make it clear that a sign that is consistent with the comprehensive sign program, once approved by the Planning Commission, doesn't require a further sign program or further sign permit. It's the whole point of a sign program. It was a little vague in the current code. We've made that express in, not actually in this section, in the prior section. Oh, there it is, in subsection F of 1608 is the requirement that once you have a sign program approved, you don't have to get approval for each individual sign. And for those who may not be familiar with them, sign programs serve to allow you to approve the comprehensive signage for a multi-tenant shopping center or a larger project that will have more than one sign or several signs. Approve it up at once up front. Okay, sure. Approve signs up front for a larger project, and then later they don't have to come in. If they want to build them in pieces, they already have approval, or if they do sign face changes or copy changes, it doesn't require a further trip to the Planning Commission. And then the abandoned signs is the same as is now with the change. That's in 1611, presently in the proposed 1609. Here again, we move the definition to the definition section where actually it was already contained. So we just deleted it here. It was duplicative. Non-conforming signs in 1610 is the same as is now. And the violations, 1611 is a combination of the prior 1603 for violations and 1613 for enforcement. 2 different sections on sign code violations. We've put them into one here, violations, sign regulations, that provides that it's a violation to post a sign on the public right-of-way, public property, or anywhere, or display any sign that requires a sign permit without a sign permit. And then we've got some language in here, existing language about options for the director and the city to take to enforce the sign code if we have an unlawful sign. And of course, bearing in mind that enforcing against unlawful signs must be done cautiously, cognizant of the strong protection both in this circuit and in the federal level for First Amendment activities that are signs or speech, thus First Amendment activities. So enforcing sign codes must be done cautiously. And then, I repeat, but it's a good point. Applicable regulations is the same. And then the last thing on the dais tonight, pages 18 through 21, are the definitions section of 3602. And this is just a subsection, of course, that's a much larger section. This is the sign definitions. Yeah, 3602 S6 to be exact, which is sign. And here we've added in the ones that I mentioned, we pulled out from the others as definitions and clarified them slightly. That's my overview. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any more detail. And it occurs to me that it may be useful to, if we put together a red line of this over the current code, so we can put that together for the next. And I'm to say, you may have done it yourself.
Compare it to the one I spent 24 hours doing.
Oh, good Lord. Maybe we should get that distributed through the staff for everybody.
I'm not guaranteeing its accuracy.
And I have software that can produce a red line as well, so I can run it through my software, and we'll get that distributed to you and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Sherry had a comment to make.
Unless you want me to wait, but my question is about the comprehensive sign program, and I completely understand they don't need a permit, which is completely fine. However, then, are we leaving it up to the owners to enforce that their signage all matches? Because if you look around town, and I won't name places,
Yeah, please don't.
their signs don't match their comprehensive sign programs. And so what we typically require is a zone clearance to make sure it matches.
That's a point to think about. Let's put that on our thinking to-do list, because that's a good point. If we have comprehensive sign programs that they don't match their signs. They don't meet their own program. That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Ray?
I apologize if I missed it in here. Does Article 16, these sign standards, apply the same to the VMU zoned businesses?
Yeah, there are proposed, with respect to the VMU, what we've proposed to be special for them is in section, and I confess I don't have all the numbers in my head. Where'd it go? No, not there. The business sign section, which we structured as signs, there it is. Page 8. This is in 1607. This language previously was business signs, and it had rules for signs for businesses. I think a business sign provision is vulnerable because you have to read the sign to know if it's for a business or not a business. But this is proposed to be replaced with rules for signs in any property within the commercial and manufacturing zoning districts that would include the VMU. And then there you can allow, the sign can display the name of the entity, and you get 2 per property, plus another one if you have more than 2 entrances, and then there's some area restrictions. So that's I think the only thing that comes directly to mind is distinct for the VMU. But to be clear, this is proposed, not final. This is a working document. We're looking for input. So if you'd like to have something different for the VMU, please articulate it.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Other questions? Bobby, anybody? Yes, Mr. Quillisi has questions for you, Mr. Summers.
What a surprise.
Yes.
I was looking at page 4 of the staff report, first paragraph, and it mentioned indirectly illuminated signs. Is that the right place? Did I miss it?
Doesn't look right.
Page 4 of 4, first paragraph. And it's not there. I don't know. Anyway, I saw a reference to indirectly illuminated signs somewhere. Okay. And I was interested in that. They are defined in 10.2.3602 S6V like Victor, but I did an electronic scan of the whole code, and it showed.
Halo's the word.
I don't know if is halo the same as indirectly illuminated? Okay. But I couldn't find the words indirectly illuminated or even indirectly, except in the definition in 10-2-3602. And so, if a halo sign,
It's
this says
required by
halo lit or
planning.
backlit signs.
Yeah, it's the halo
If
and
that's
it's
the
required
same
by
thing, that's
commission.
fine. I was just interested because,
Well, in the W, if you look at page 19 and 21, W is indirectly illuminated sign
Ah.
in the definition.
yes, in the definition, right. What I was saying was, it doesn't appear anywhere else. And I was just wondering why, if we need to have something different in W that actually ties back to verbiage elsewhere in Article 16, then I could better understand what the rules are. If a halo lit or backlit sign is the same thing.
I think the answer is they're not the same thing. It's a very,
Talks about halo lit letters are lit from behind, and so,
a halo lit sign is a type of indirectly illuminated sign. An indirectly illuminated sign is any sign in which there's not light, it doesn't have the light inside of it. So that would include a halo lit sign where the light is behind the sign and backlights onto the wall behind. It would also include a flat sign on a wall with a bracket out and a light pointing on it. That would also be indirectly illuminated. So
or a monument sign with the ground mount.
with the two ground mounted lights.
Like the psychic place down there on Ojai.
Yes, that would be an indirectly illuminated sign. So I think it sounds like we've identified a hole that we need to fill
Well,
by
I don't-
building
I
in some
don't know. I
rules.
just couldn't find it. So maybe it belongs in
Sure.
1607. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Perhaps it belongs in 1607E, halo lit or backlit signs. And if it doesn't, then we need to add something else in 1607.
And it might also be appropriate to put it 1603H, page 3 of 21, which has some rules about illumination generally. So it might make sense to add something there. If we
Okay.
wanted to have a provision there for indirectly illuminated signs. And I think we would want it to be compliant with the dark sky ordinance and not leak light onto other properties, provisions along those lines.
What else was
Okay.
there?
Any other questions for Mr. Summers?
I want to say I appreciate what you have done so far in clarifying the language. I found the original hard to read in places, and the modified version is considerably easier, though not easy. I have given staff some comments already on the details of the admin report and on the TA itself. If we could get a red line version of the TA, just so I can
Yeah,
make
we'll
sure
put
that
that
I didn't
together.
make any mistakes there. And then I will have other comments to submit to staff as we go.
Great. Other comments? Mr. Summers, do you have enough feedback from us?
I think I've got certainly initial feedback, and like I said, this is a lot of text, and to be clear, this is a legislative item, so you're required to make your decision in a public hearing, but you are, it's not one where there's an applicant with the procedural due process rights who has the right to have the hearing, the decision made solely on the information in the record, which means that if you have an individual comment, just email me. And I'd be happy to take them in and build them into the mix. So if you peruse this as you move forward, please send me your comments. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate you doing this work because I know this is one of the things that comes up often from the public is that our sign ordinance is incomprehensible to people. So I hope that this goes a long ways to making it more comprehensive.
That's our goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nolan?
Yes. Quick question, Mr. Summers. So will you be emailing out to us the red line version between now and our next meeting so that we'll be able to go through that? I know for me it'll be a lot easier.
Yes, what we'll do is we'll make it available, I think this week, and we'll email it to the commission and the council, and a copy will be available from the Community Development Department for any members of the public who wish.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to informational items. Mr. Winninger, director decisions, future agenda items.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you have on your 6th tab list of recent decisions. There are no significant decisions of note since your last meeting.
Could I ask one thing on that? So are the Boku Superfoods people actually going into that building?
Yes, they are, and they're currently renovating the building.
That's fantastic, because I remember they came to us for a concept review or something, but we never saw any other drawings, so that's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Most of the improvements are cosmetic. They're mostly consist of painting, adding shutters, and so on. So it was suitable for a director's exemption.
Excellent.
For your July 5th meeting, or excuse me, you have several items on your June 21st agenda. We don't have anything currently scheduled for July 5th. And then on July 19th, we'll be bringing the WaterWise. I don't know if it'd be actually in the form of an ordinance or what.
It'll be probably a discussion item.
Yes, right. It will be a discussion item.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I'm not sure we're there yet.
On the 21st, I just want to note that we are having that presentation by the Sustainability Living Research Initiative.
Thank you.
So, thank you. We'll bring back, it's our intention to bring back the sign ordinance on that date as well.
Okay.
And then you have a couple other items.
This might be a good point to jump in and ask if anybody has any conflicts coming up for the summer. Is that correct? Chester?
I won't be here for probably the month of August.
Okay. Anybody else?
I will be, hopefully, if we can take care of it that way, I would like to be absent on August 2nd, and I will be out of the county on September 6th, I think it is.
I may be gone September 6th as well. So we might take that into consideration. We might end up canceling one of these meetings in August.
Yeah, I won't be here for September 6th either. I have a wedding to go to. So
Enjoy your
It's looking
time
pretty
off.
iffy.
Dang.
I might be gone there too.
That's right.
Tentatively
Okay.
planning something. So.
Well, maybe that would be a good meeting to
Maybe we should
skip.
all go.
We'll see how it works out here. Sounds like June 21st is going to be a busy meeting.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion on that?
You can.
Because we don't know how long the SLRI presentation is going to be, plus with dialogue. I mean, it's a whole new thing we're bringing in here. The sustainability leadership? Sustainable Living Research Initiative. He's coming from Santa Barbara to come do a special presentation. So I'm wondering if we could move the sign ordinance hearing to the 5th of July and put that off, just so we have one less thing.
You can continue it. We noticed it, so we can just open it and continue it.
Yeah, I don't want to impact the two DRPs that are there, because those are, local residents who are wanting our feedback on things, so I don't really want to push them to another date. But I would feel more comfortable if we only had 3 items on June 21st versus 4.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be easy to arrange.
Continue it when we get to the 21st.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's plan to continue that item. That'd be great. Okay. And then continuing on,
Were there any other commissioners that expect to miss meetings?
it sounds like we're going to have a couple people absent that first meeting in September.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Planning Commission committee reports. Commissioner Nolan, City Council?
Yes. Okay. No, that was a couple weeks ago, so I got to
Yes.
pull my notes out. Actually, it was one of the shorter meetings, because I've been to some of them where I've been there till, pretty late in the night. But I'm just going to jump ahead, I know it's late, to the discussion item. And I think probably the biggest one was the, hold on a second. It was the certificate of sufficiency of petition for the petition entitled Referendum Against a Resolution passed by the City Council, and this had to do with the OTID, or the Ojai Tourism Improvement District. But just to simplify things, you know, there was some discussion because there had been a petition, and apparently they met their required quantity of people to sign it, that there were 3 options. One of them was to have a special election and a vote by November 2018, and then the third one was a litigation. But what the ultimate result of that evening was that they wanted more information, and the council wanted more information, and they wanted to make sure they did it correctly. So they voted to continue the discussion until the next meeting. So that was that. Then there was a discussion on the contracts that they have with, for code enforcement and site-specific, providing planning positions with the city. And they also mentioned that they were covering code enforcement and short-term rentals. And they went over costs for that. And then let's see, what else did I have here? Oh, then there were some brief reports on the broadband internet service, and then also the new Gold Coast Center. There was a ceremony for that. It's a new transit hub in Ventura behind, or I guess is that Oxnard, but it's behind Costco. And then also there was mention of the school board meeting, which was the choice on the Chaparral property, which is still, I guess, up for discussion. I'm sure more happened last night. I wasn't at the last, this was 2 weeks ago. And Councilmember Haney discussed the Libby Bowl users, and there was a question about waiving the fees and what have you. And let's see what else. Oh, there was a ribbon cutting for Sarasota Park, the new picnic area. And coming up was the medical cannabis interviews, which may have already happened, like I said. They did.
But no decision made.
But no decision made, good. And then the future items for June 13th were the leaf blowers and possible locations for the marijuana dispensaries. And let's see, discussion about, historic preservation, 2 sites for potential landmarking. And then, of course, the budget meeting, which was June 6th.
Okay.
So that was kind of it.
And you're also,
in a nutshell.
Can you report on the Complete Streets meeting, or did we go through that in our?
I can just do it really quickly today. What we're working on is basically coming up with a list for sidewalk infill. So Public Works Department actually had some funds set aside. We approved that the first project would be on Montgomery Street, South Montgomery, 2 sides of the streets, and that would be the first infill area. So basically where the bakery is in front of the coffee roaster, and then in front of, what was it, Decor? That's the other one. Yeah, because we're doing both sides of the street.
South Montgomery.
South Montgomery, but on the east and the west side. All right, so basically what we're doing is we're going out, we're collecting data. Eventually we're going to be putting it on a map. Also the same thing for additional bike parking or bike racks or stands within the public right-of-way. And then another item that came up was, and this kind of had to do with our master plan, we had identified in the master plan, there was talk of an easement that went from the end of the bike trail, where you see it now, down by Bryant, all the way to Soul Park to the Equestrian Center. And a couple of our members did a little more research, and we discovered from the county that even though there's mention of it, there's no record of it. So we're not sure where that's going to go, but ideally we'd love to see that happen. Let's see.
And the new contract for managing Soul Park Golf Course
says
that the new managers have complete control of all the land.
Oh.
That's right.
And so
yeah,
the places where a trail might go to the Equestrian Center all involve them ceding some land for that purpose. So
possibly. And so anyway, so that's really up in the air. We're going to have to do some more research on that. And then the other thing was, I know Mr. Grant brought up the ATP grant. They're actually filing for, on June 18th, a 20-month extension, because a lot of what they're doing is being handed over to Caltrans because the grant is on both state highways. So, and the big obstacle is, and the reason they're going for the extension is the section of the ATP grant that goes through downtown in the arcade post office area. There's several properties or buildings that are considered historic or possibly historic or potentially historic. And so they've got to go through a whole CEQA type of review that Caltrans is handling. And then I think that was it. Oh, one other announcement, because Steve, thank you for announcing that we meet the first Wednesday of the month. But we've decided to cancel, which we rarely ever do, our July meeting. So we're planning to meet again in August. It'll be August 2nd. And one other comment. I know that I don't have, it says no report for sustainability, but I just wanted to ask something. Presently, myself and Commissioner Jagiello are on the Sustainability Committee, but Commissioner Powers would like to join us. So I wanted to ask for, make the request to the rest of the commission.
I think that's fine, as long as you only have 3.
That would be 3.
That would be fine.
Exactly, yeah.
As long as it's okay with Chester.
He's smiling over there.
Okay.
Did Commissioner Corbin say you couldn't attend the MAC meeting at the last meeting? Who's taking over?
Yeah, we talked about this beforehand. It is it's sort of under 8, but I had it originally on my own calendar to attend the June 19th meeting and report back at June 21st.
Very good.
So I will do that rather than Bobby, who won't be there to do it.
All right.
But I'd like to know when they're meeting and where they're meeting, because the last time I had this assignment, I showed up at 6 o'clock, and the guy responsible for the building thought the MAC meeting was going to be there at 6 o'clock. And at 6:45, I abandoned the effort, and evidently at 14 minutes to 7, everybody showed up for a 7 o'clock meeting.
I'll send you the agenda.
Yeah, if you'll send me the invitation and the agenda, whatever, that should say the time. That'd be great.
Thank you. One other item I probably should have said during public comments earlier, just wanted to congratulate the people in Ojai Flow, because today Golden State was officially sold to Casitas Municipal Water Company, which I think is an amazing accomplishment. And I really look forward to getting Casitas water in my house from this time forward.
Since we're already paying the parcel tax,
Since we are,
it'd be
yes,
nice
yes.
to get the lower water rates that go with it.
Yes. And now we come to our city council liaison, the last city council member sitting in our meeting.
Last man standing.
It's a long day. I'm sure it's a long day for all of us. My eyes are burning. Good evening. I just had a couple simple comments. I read our packet, and that's why when I read the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines, I wanted to know what were they. And if I had to ask, I knew that you had to ask. You guys didn't know either. So, so one of my notes is the fact if we really look at the infill on 33, or in the one, or I should say the 150, it's all in this east end.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised that you guys haven't had this, because this is going to dictate what you guys review and how you review moving forward. So that's the majority of.
Open space is
Yeah,
too.
it's interesting from my perspective. I've always looked at this east end corridor lacking. You know, that we got the hotels down there, but we'd have anything else that brings them to us. So there's a disconnect between the heart and, I'm not going to say the soul, but I am, although Soul Park might say something to that. But it is interesting. We've never had a connection there. And I've been here, 25 years, and it's always just amazed me that no one's pushed for it. So now we have an opportunity, and the same thing with this, I don't know what we would call the microbrewery or the hotel, whatever it is going to end up. It seems like someone's looked at this end of our city and said, there's a lot of hotels and a lot of things here that don't make it down to the heart. So let's give them, let's provide a service to them. That's my thoughts on it. So you guys did a great job discussing that tonight. I have, again, I'll wait until if it comes before us, or hopefully they'll provide a conceptual plan and get this thing moving forward. That was the third one that they presented?
Third time.
Yep.
Yeah, well, let's hope third time's the charm.
Yeah.
Signs. Ray, you're a music guy. Who sang the song, Signs, Signs, Everywhere Sign? Remember that 60s hit? So it's interesting. I remember one of the very first discussions we had on council my first year was the banner ordinance and the banner, the Pixie banners and how they were going to be hung and what size and blah, blah, blah. And for the life of me, I couldn't believe that we were spending that much time talking about banners. And the reality is, just a quick review of our ordinance, there's 50 different types of signs that we have to consider. And then with the new case or the new concerns or the new issues regarding it, it brought me back to when Kathy and I were sharing a building together off of Bryant, and I wanted to put Haney landscape sign out there on Bryant Street, and Kathy goes, "Oh, no, you can't do that." I sit on the planning commission. You got to have a permit to put your sign out there, and I went, "Really?" But it was just, all these things come back to you, and it's like, the reality is you have to have them. The reality is you've got to have, some type of settled law that says this is how we behave in a community, and these are good things. So it's just good governance. So it was lack of my understanding of that initially, and I do appreciate, Matt, all the work that both of you have put into this. So with that, it's 9:15. If you don't have any questions of me, I would come to the June next week's city council session. It's going to be a good one. I just think it's just going to be a great discussion for this community. And then I think with the discussion last night regarding the budget, and if you really start looking at how things are funded in this community, I think there's going to be a better understanding of the importance of some of the funding mechanisms. So I look forward to that conversation next week. All right, and I hope you all got a copy of this.
Yep.
Keep it. Take care.
Thank you very much. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.